issues that brought you here today are very important to you. So attendance has been taken. We're all here. Usually the approval of the agenda is a very easy thing to do, but I'm going to cut it up here and make it a little bit more difficult. First thing I want to do is we have a group of people here from Mount Pleasant that want to speak to us as a delegation. So I'm going to ask for a motion to let them speak. Councillor Coleman, seconded by Councillor Gatwood. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So the group from Mount Pleasant will be number F on our delegations. The next thing I'd like a motion for, please, is to change my resolution, which is number E on the agenda, to number A on the agenda, to do it first. So I need a motion to change that. Councillor Howes and Councillor Ferrier. Any opposition to changing them up a little bit? All those in favor? Thank you. Now I need a motion to approve the adjusted agenda. You have a question first, Councillor Chambers?
I'm wondering if I could just add one item to the agenda
Sure.
briefly, and I can do it right now, Mr. Mayor. It's a congratulatory resolution.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I had the great pleasure of serving with a councillor in the former township of Burford, who actually was the first woman deputy reeve, first woman councillor in Burford, and she went on to serve on county council, I think in 1985 and 1988, which was my first term on council. And yesterday she had the spectacular privilege of turning 100 years old. It was her birthday. She was 100 years old. So I would like to wish Mrs. Doris Gibbons, a former county councillor, happy birthday, and hopefully many more, her 100th birthday.
And we'll make sure this council does recognize it in the form of a certificate and make sure she gets it. So thank you for bringing that up. So we've had the agenda approved. At this point, I would like to call on Benjamin Pickles to come up to the podium, please. What I'm going to do is I'm making a resolution today to acknowledge the climate situation that we're in. And I've been asked by many people in the county, when am I going to get on board and when am I going to support the climate crisis? And I was sitting at my desk last week and I looked out my window and I saw these kids out front with placards speaking about the climate disaster and telling people what they knew, and they had cards that said, "We have no planet B," and they were telling everyone what I should have told them in a resolution much earlier than tonight. So what I've asked Benjamin to do is to read my resolution for me, and I have a seconder in Councillor Coleman, and after Ben's finished, we'll call the vote and we'll deal with this separately before we get into the delegation. So at this point, I would like to call on my friend Benjamin Pickles.
Whereas in April 2016, world leaders from 175 countries recognized the threat of climate change and the urgent need to combat it by signing the Paris Agreement, agreeing to keep global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And whereas Canada has disproportionately contributed to the climate and ecological crises, and thus bears an extraordinary responsibility to rapidly solve these crises. And whereas the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the scientific consensus confirm that the only way to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius is to become net carbon neutral by 2050. And whereas an emergency mobilization on an unprecedented scale will be required to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions across all sectors by 2050, and whereas the County of Brant has experienced the social impacts and borne the financial costs due to more intense storms and greater volatility in local climate patterns. And whereas the County of Brant joins with 470 other Canadian municipalities, the Government of Canada, and more than 1,190 governments around the world in recognizing climate change as a clear and present danger to our community, an existential imperative to begin the transition to an ecologically, socially, and economically regenerative economy. And it is hereby resolved in the County of Brant, that the County of Brant declares a climate emergency that threatens our county, province, nation, civilization, and the natural world. Be it hereby The County of Brant further declares its commitment in principle to becoming net carbon neutral by 2050. That the County of Brant commits to maximum transparency with the residents, businesses, community organizations, and other partners in the climate action mobilization. The County of Brant commits to a county-wide climate emergency mobilization effort to adapt to current climate change impacts and mitigate future climate change. The County of Brant adopt a carbon reduction strategy target, which would reasonably and effectively lead the county to becoming net carbon neutral by 2050. And that the staff be directed to develop a carbon reduction strategy to be provided to council.
Thank you, Ben. That is my resolution. I have a seconder in Councillor Coleman. If I could ask for a recorded vote, please. Is there any questions before we vote? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think we should all congratulate Ben for doing a fantastic job. I met him the other day at Jingle Bell Night. He said that he wanted to become a politician, so I think he's well on track there. I'm not asking Ben to answer these questions, but just how far away are we at the moment from being net neutral?
Well, I think we've always been very careful as to what we did. I don't know exactly what staff's going to tell us we could do better, faster, and how clean we can make things. I think we have always been very aware of the climate crisis, and we have our own sort of energy programs in the county. So I think we've always been rather responsible. So I don't think it's going to be a huge noticeable change, but I do think that now that we've proclaimed it, that we're going to have to always be very aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So.
And one final question, if I may. Are we talking about the County of Brant, the corporation of the County of Brant, or are we talking about the entirety of the County of Brant?
The corporation of the County of Brant.
Thank you.
Which does encompass the whole county. Councillor Laferriere.
Thank you. Through you and to you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for bringing this forward and bringing it forward quickly. I think it's vital. I'm wondering if there might be an openness on specifics, not to amend this motion, but more a staff direction as we go forward and look at the report. I've been looking at some of the similar proclamations and some of the results from other communities in Ontario that have been doing this. And some of the things that they've done, which I think would be a very good fit here, is they've established internal teams of their municipalities, looking at each department and designating somebody within that department to be a person to actually manage, fulfill, and stimulate ideas on how we can do this. And I think that would be a really wonderful way to go, and I see the CAO taking notes, so that makes me very happy. And also to look at maybe creating a climate emergency portion of our website for the fair and neutral reporting of what we're doing and how we're doing it. I think that would take care of two of the pieces of this resolution practically. So I hope there's support for that. And I want to, again, thank you and Ben for pushing this and bringing it forward.
Thank you. Any other questions before we vote? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's more of a comment. I want to thank you for bringing this forward, and it is important. Ben's generation hopefully will see some improvements by the time he's our age. And I was thinking the same thing as Councillor Bell, that when he stood there and read so eloquently, I thought perhaps there's a future councillor here. So thank you, Ben, for your excellent reading, and thank you, Mayor Bailey, for bringing this forward. And I believe that the county and some of our new buildings that we are constructing are trying to be mindful of climate and how we heat those buildings, etc. So thank you.
Thank you. And I was very glad to see that Councillor Coleman was my seconder, because he is my go-to farmer, and climate does matter in agriculture, and we are at the very least most of that. So thank you, Councillor Coleman, for jumping on board. And with that being said, if there's no other questions, I'd like to call a recorded vote. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, Ben. Moving on to the next delegation is going to be the Legion. Who's speaking on behalf of the Legion? Is that Roy Haggard?
If you don't bow, it's not a vote.
If I can get you to state your name and your address, please.
My address?
We
My
have it
name-
on, we have it on file if you don't want to.
No. My name is Roy Haggard, and I live at 61 Bradbury Crescent, Paris, Ontario, N3L 4E2. Anyway, it's been a lot of years since I've been in this building, and it's still the same. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. Thank you, individually and collectively, for stepping up to represent the residents of the County of Brant sitting in the seats that you're sitting in. I truly understand the commitment that is required for you to sit in these chairs. And for one, I appreciate it. I'm sure the municipality and the residents appreciate it as well. Andy Moran, our president of Branch 29 Legion, and I are here this evening to briefly provide a quick review in support of our application for a municipal grant. Your support of this grant will assist us with accessibility renovations and updates to our branch located at 70 William Street. Branch 29 Royal Canadian Legion has been serving our community, our veterans, and our youth for a very long time here in Paris. Going back to 1917, 1919, with its origins as a member of the Great War Veterans Association, raising funds at the Paris Presbyterian Church to help World War I veterans returning home from the Great War. The Paris branch of the Royal Canadian Legion was granted its charter in 1926, the 29th branch to apply. The building that is now our home was bequeathed to the branch on the passing of the last Smoke brother in 1936. So it's been our home for 83 years here in Paris. In July of this year, the branch undertook a building renovation campaign to raise funds for capital replacement, upgrades, and renovations. Our primary goal is accessibility throughout the branch for our veterans, our members, our guests, and our community groups that use our facilities. The branch, through its lottery licenses, provides funding to many organizations in and around Paris, and I've included in our application for the delegation a list of people that we donate money to on a yearly basis. Unfortunately, the license regulations for our lotteries at the branch do not permit any use of those funds for capital improvements. Over the years of our service to the community, Branch 29, to the best of our knowledge, has never requested a municipal grant. We believe our grant request to be in line with major grants that you approved in 2018. We've developed a renovation plan that looks at both the immediate needs and the long-term potential of renovations. The long-term call for major provincial, federal funding through the grant process, while the short-term requirements manageable investment through our building renovation campaign, which has been exceptionally well received here in the community and outside of the community. We've attached a floor plan of, of the main floor renovations under consideration, as well as a proposed budget for the short-term upgrades. New upgrades include automatic push-button on-grade entrance, new handicap wheelchair accessibility washrooms, opening of doorways to accommodate greater accessibility within the branch, a new air conditioner, which is 28 years old, so it's time to replace that, new hard surface flooring, main lobby in the corridor, relocate fire doors with magnetic closures, kitchen relocation to the main floor, accessibility upgrades to our existing washrooms. Aggressive? Yes. But it can be done, and it may be done in a phased process. We believe that the County of Brant Municipal Council cannot be expected to provide all of the community resources to facilitate all of our community needs. Making use of our existing buildings and facilities within our community is good for the community and good financially for the council and the County of Brant. With the revitalization of the Branch 29 through this accessibility renovation process, Branch 29 can become significantly a new, vibrant community hub, serving more of our community groups through the expanded use of our facilities at no charge to these community groups. We are proud to serve, and we wish to serve into the very, very long-term future, and we look forward to your support. I'd like to introduce President Andy.
Thanks, Roy. Roy asked me to speak at the end of this tonight, and I got it on a very small piece of paper so I won't run on too long. Your Worship, a head table, County of Brant councillors and guests, I bring you greetings from Branch 29, and I thank you for allowing us to make our presentation. I've been a member of Branch 29 for 46 years, the last 22 of which I've been on the executive in many. I live at 39 Curtis Ave in Paris, Ontario. I was born in the Willet Hospital, so I've been here a little while. As Joe said, we received our charter in 1926 and for over 90 years have supported our community. We probably put back in the community approximately $15,000 to $20,000 yearly. Some who have received our assistance, Stedman Place, Willet Hospital, Minor Softball, Ringette, the Air Paris Band, Paris Port Dover Band, Christmas Hoppers, and many others. The service clubs in this community put much money back into it. And if they didn't do that, where would that money come from? I'm talking about your Lions, your Optimists, your JCs. They all do a lot of community support. In closing, for all who helped on Remembrance Day and in our Poppy campaign, our special thanks to the Brant County staff, the County of Brant OPP, the County of Brant Fire Department, and the County of Brant Works. It's a big day for us and it's a lot of work, but luckily it all seems just to fall together at the last moment. Thanks again. And Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We're getting really close to that.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions to the delegation? Councillor House.
Just a quick question, and first a thank you. Thank you for all that you do for our community. My question is specific to, and this is for some of the people who might be watching at home who don't necessarily have access to the full delegation package, but when I stopped into the branch and had a little bit of a tour, you opened my eyes to, like, we all know that becoming compliant with accessibility can cost a lot of money. Specific to your building, you have some unique obstacles, and I'm thinking primarily about that outside staircase. Could you just touch on that a little bit so that people understand some of the costs that you are facing with this project? Thanks.
Well, the short-term projects that we have submitted that primarily are internal changes are in the vicinity of $90,000, $93,000, $95,000, including tax and overrides. The outside entrance, we have issues with our stairs internally, and we have a kind of a steel fire escape at the back, and which restricts the upstairs and the basement. We have 3 floors there, and 2 are not really accessible that much. So our plan is to put a full set of staircases from the main floor to the second floor to the basement, which will allow a proper fire exit entrance to the basement. It's approximately 18 by 24 addition. We have to move some doorways. Again, we have to make it code reliant. And our hopes are, through the grant process, that we can put in a elevator to service the second, main, and basement floor areas. We have been very fortunate in attracting help, in-kind services. Don Plumstead, who is a resident of Paris, has come forward and is doing all of our working drawings and donating all of those services. Joe Cahoon has come up and he is supporting the program. I'm sure you are familiar with those names. And we have a lady at the back here, Rosemary Rich, who has come forward and helping us with our grant process for Trillium and accessibility funds. All told, we have an estimate of $650,000 for that 18 by 24 addition, 3 stars. It's a big job. But like I said, I think if we can do this, it'll make another community hub that is viable for use within the community. And for community groups, we will not charge those groups.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roy. Any other questions of the delegation? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation, and we'll deal with you in just a second.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next thing on the agenda is number C, which is the Oak Park Road Extension impacts on the county. I believe Pat's speaking to that. Pat, if you can give us your full name and your address, please.
I have to put my glasses on. My name is Pat Fedak, and I live in the county of Brant at 117 Jennings Road at the entrance to Brant Park. Our property back fence line is the border between the city of Brantford and the county of Brant. Behind our fence is the Oak Hill Trail, which is connected to the Trans-Canada Trail System. I was invited to speak to you by Mayor Bailey, councillors Brian Coleman and Joan Gatward, during a meeting around my kitchen table discussing the proposed Brantford Oak Park Road extension and the irreversible effects on the environment and the residents of the county of Brant and Brantford. You probably are aware of this proposed 4-lane road to connect Brantford Street West to Oak Park Road and the 403. It would be an invasive road coming north from Coburn Street West at the top of the hill on a 4-lane raised road alongside residents in the Kennard Survey, over Oak Hill Drive and over the entrance road to Oak Hill Cemetery. At this point, it is a raised 4-lane road immediately adjacent to homes on Oak Hill Drive and Kershaver Terrace. From here, it will flatten out and be parallel to Jennings Road, then Robinson Lane and Brant Park. At this point, it must cross a yet-to-be-built 4-lane bridge over the Grand River, not far from the Golf and Country Club, and on through an environmentally sensitive areas to connect Oak Park to Oak Park Road. This road's been discussed on and off since the annexation agreement in 1980 between the County of Brant and Brantford. As in the agreement, there was to be a service corridor between the south residential area, the Shullard Lane area, and the north industrial area. The sewer and water services have now been connected after much hassle and to-do, which you probably remember, in trying to cross the Grand River, and problems involving native land claims, aquifers, and tunneling under the riverbed. Finally, the problems were solved by hanging the service pipes under a pedestrian bridge. This whole area from the cemetery at Oak Hill Drive to the pedestrian bridge is a wonderful green oasis enjoyed by many using the Oak Hill Trail. After crossing the bridge, one connects to the S.C. Johnson Trail, which is part of the Trans-Canada Trail system. The City of Brantford has now voted to finance an environmental study to build this invasive road, which will completely and forever change this special green, peaceful oasis enjoyed by city and county residents, tourists, international visitors, photographers, birders, naturalists, bikers, campers, hikers, and of course, wildlife. Impacts of a 4-lane arterial road on neighboring residents. Loss of enjoyment of property due to loud traffic noise, which seems to echo strangely in the Grand River Valley. Loss of enjoyment of property due to a complete visual change when looking out of their windows. Loss of enjoyment of property due to air pollution, salt pollution of wells and yards. Change in property values. Loss of a safe, peaceful, quiet countryside trail, now well used by mothers pushing strollers, dog walkers, children on trikes and bikes, and seniors, runners, and many others. Impacts of this 4-lane road on tourism. Loss of scenic, healthy, peaceful countryside visiting campers to Brant Park from all parts of Canada, the U.S., and abroad. Loss of safe scenic trails to users of the Trans-Canada Trail system, hikers and touring cyclists. Loss of natural areas visited by birders, naturalists, and photographers. Impacts of this 4-lane road on wildlife. Loss of natural habitat consisting of several wooded areas, small wetlands, and access to the Grand River will affect many deer, reestablished wild turkeys, foxes, declining frogs, and turtles. A 4-lane road through this natural area will be very dangerous to both mankind and deer. There are many different groups of deer passing through this area, often twice a day to go down to the river to drink. The City of Brantford is under pressure to provide this invasive road to link up to the 403 and ease congested streets and computer frustration, and this road looks so logical on paper. Several alternate routes involving city, county, and provincial roads have been suggested in the past. If the city, county, and province could partner on improving other corridors, it would benefit everyone and be far less costly for all taxpayers. Please help to avoid the building of this awful road. Help the residents whose whole way of life will be horribly and forever affected. Help to save a special green area for all to use. Help protect property values and tax revenues in the city and the county. Help to make Oak Park Road extension redundant and save an Ontario green oasis for all to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions to the presenter? Councillor Ferrier?
Yes, thank you. I spoke with a Brantford councillor about this specifically a few hours ago, and they seemed pretty in favor of the extension. It's all on Brantford property, correct?
Right.
So I'm wondering if, and I don't know if it'll have the support of council, but something else that this person brought up from Brantford Council was that he feels there'd be support for a joint city-county transportation task force, which is part of the ask. I kind of surmised about other potential routes, and it's probably best practice to do that anyway. So I guess I'll ask this, since it's not our property, it's city property, not county property now. If we can't directly
I
get
understand
involved
that. Right.
to stop it,
Right.
do you feel that there might be some helpfulness if somebody, myself or anybody else from around this table, were to propose a joint city-county transportation task force or something like that?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, well, thank you for inviting me to your kitchen table. It was great, and you do have an oasis of green there. And Brian and Joan were all very happy that you've come forward. This is going to, if it does happen at all, it's going to take a long time for it to happen. So good for you for getting this process started as early as you have. So thank you. Alternative truck route signage, traffic on Watts Pond Road. Brenda's going to present. And again, your full name and your address, please.
Hi, I'm Brenda Clements. I live at 1006 Watts Pond Road, which is the gravel section of the Watts Pond. I think you all have in your package a copy of the map that I'd made. Sorry, I'm not as technical as that last lady. So, 8 to 9 years ago, we had a meeting with councillors. We had a meeting with the councillors about the gravel pit that was going in, and we were all assured of where exactly the truck route was going to be. That's on your maps marked in black. I can assure you they're not using the truck route. And when I've driven around to investigate why, and I have also stopped trucks to ask them why, they say there are no signs. There are none. We don't have an alternate truck route. So they're coming straight down Watts Pond. My problem is when they get to the Air Road at Watts Pond, they're not turning left on the pavement. They're continuing to go straight through. There's been a drastic increase in the amount of gravel trucks that go up and down our section of the road. And I will say we did a lot of work restoring our place and cleaning it up and doing all that. And now every time a truck goes by, there's a vibration in our house because the road is not meant to hold that heavy of traffic. The road is also not one that should be paved because the water table's too close. None of the neighbors want it paved. We just want the gravel trucks to use an appropriate route. There are between 15 and 20 of them going down every day. They're going fast, most of them. 98% of the trucks that go down Watts Pond heading west are turning left. Town line is not wide enough to have slow-moving gravel trucks pull out. I'm sure you've all been on town line. The traffic moves along there. It comes flying up over that hill. Somebody's going to be killed at that intersection, and I really would like that to be avoided. I also use that road, and these trucks are just wreaking havoc. The county paid a lot of money to have the intersection at the end of Keg Lane and Town Line updated, I guess you would call it, to accommodate the trucks. They're not all using it. Along the gravel part of Watts Pond, all the local farmers also use that to transport their farming equipment. This keeps them off of Keg Lane, which is where we all want. We don't want tractors on Keg Lane. They should be off to the backside. But these trucks are impeding that. We have witnessed gravel trucks having to slam on their brakes to avoid the school bus that's turning off of Nith Road, turning west onto Watts Pond. The gravel trucks. Here's a big one. They are destroying our gravel road, and the county does not grade that road that often. With the amount of traffic of the gravel trucks and the damage they're doing, I can almost lose my car in some of those potholes. It's not meant to hold that heavy of traffic, and if they're going to continue, then we need the county to be coming out like every 2 to 3 weeks to grade that road. And at this point, that's what we're paying our taxes for. None of the residents on Watts Pond on the gravel section want it paved, so that's not where we're going. It's already been investigated, and it's too expensive. And frankly, if you pave it, I'm moving. That's why we chose that location. Actions that I have already taken. I contacted the gravel pit directly, requesting they post signage for the drivers. I was advised that it's not their issue. It's the councilors for the county of Brant that have not yet. They're supposed to be responsible for doing the alternate truck route. They should have had it completed 8 years ago. I realize there's all new people now, so I can't even hold anybody accountable for the delay in that happening. I have actually stopped trucks to speak to them. They're telling me, get signs put up. That's pretty much it. I have gone to the extreme of contacting different trucking companies. I've been taking pictures, running out to the road so I know who it is. That has actually been very successful for the larger companies. For the smaller ones, not so much. I contacted Mike Tout with the County of Brant the end of July. Mike advised that he would contact the trucks that were hauling for the Town Line Road project. He did, and that was successful. Those companies have not been on the road. He also advised me at that time that he would start the process to have Watts Pond deemed as no trucks, as well as start the process to have the alternate truck route done, because they shouldn't be going down any of those roads. In early November, when I followed up, I was forwarded on to Steve Howe, and Steve advised me that it was going to be in a couple of years that I should contact the gravel pit, which I told him I did, and everybody's passing the blame all over the place. Steve also suggested that I come and speak at this meeting, so here I am. Questions, we have lots of questions, like why weren't things done in a timely manner? Nothing can happen with that. There's nothing more we can do. That time is already gone. If the county is going to put off making the gravel section for trucks only, then I put this to you. Would you please have it graded every 3 weeks, or can I submit my car alignment costs? Either one would work. The desired outcome that I have and the neighbors have for this is an immediate posting of no trucks. To us, there is no logical reason why deeming that section no trucks has to wait for some kind of a traffic study, which, as I said, should have been done 8 years ago. So we would like that done immediately. I'll even pay for the sign. I'm not asking for money. I just want the sign up so these trucks aren't running people over. And we would like to please have you tell us that you are actually starting the alternate truck route. This is our town. We moved here because we love it, and I don't want to see trucks on Silver Street. I don't want to see them downtown. I don't want to see them anywhere except on an alternate truck route, and I don't think that's unreasonable. I thank you all for listening, and I really hope that you will agree and we can get something done so that a farmer or a school bus or a driver on Town Line is not in a serious accident first, because it seems we usually wait too late to get these things done. So that's my request, please, and thank you very much, folks.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions to the presenter? Councillor House.
My first time doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mrs. Clement.
Yes.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And yes, transportation master plans do take a couple of years. But I'm glad that you came in. Truck routes is a pet topic of mine. So, and while I didn't get invited to your kitchen table like the mayor seems to get with some of the delegates, you did invite me to drive up and down your road.
Yes, I did.
Which I have done.
Oh, good.
Multiple times in the last 2 weeks. So my question for you is, would you say that in the last couple weeks, or maybe it's just this time of year, that there's been a reduction in the number of trucks since prior to that?
Well, this morning by 10 o'clock, my husband stayed home from work today, and by 10 o'clock there had already been 5. So I got to say no, averaging it out.
Okay. I unfortunately, and it's kind of like taking your car to the mechanic and the noise doesn't happen anymore. The days that I was out there, the 3 different times, were not significant truck days, but I realize that that doesn't necessarily say
Right.
anything. My question specifically, other question to you is 15 to 20 trucks a day is about what you're experiencing throughout most of the year?
Yes,
Okay,
it definitely since early spring.
okay.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
I've taken days off so I can sit and watch them.
I know what that feels like. So,
Yes.
thanks very much for the information.
Thanks, sir. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to, through you to the presenter, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. Just to be clear, you live in between Air Road and Nith Road?
I live between Nith Road and Town Line,
Okay. Town
but
Line.
it's the entire gravel section.
Town Line, is that Brant Oxford Road?
Yes, sorry, Brant.
You call it Town Line, okay, no problem. And then, is it all gravel trucks, or is there other trucks?
Gravel trucks. We've never had any other really, I mean, there's a milk truck that goes down it, but
Okay.
he's supposed to.
I'm just trying to figure out why they would be using that road. Are they going,
Because
are
it's-
they going north?
No, they're going down to the end and then they're turning left, like 98% of them. Trussler, sorry. It changes names a couple of times.
Okay,
And I think they're just, well, they're telling me that they're going through because there's no signs.
yeah, okay.
Because, like I said, I've
Well,
actually stopped them.
Yeah, okay, like I said, I'm just trying to wrap my head. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ferrier.
I just wanted to make sure, Councillor Howes and I both, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Howes and I both received correspondence from the gravel pit company about it sounds like 2 to 3 times a year, they're having these sort of public meetings or some sort of community advisory group. Did you receive information about that?
No, I've not received anything since the last meeting
Okay,
that we were told.
So Councillor Howes and I have committed to going to those meetings, at least one of us, if not both of us, when they are held. And they say that they're open to members of the community. So what I'd like to ask you is if there'd be a willingness, if we're able to find out when those are, for you and maybe your neighbors to come along with us to all get in the same room together with the
Yeah, I have
company.
no problem with that. However, the gravel company has made it
Yep.
rudely clear that it is not their problem. There are no signs, and they are not in control of the truckers. The truck drivers are all independently owned.
Yep. No, I understand that, but you'd be willing to attend
I
that kind of
absolutely
meeting
would.
with us and other concerned members
As
of the
soon as
community
you
about
put
this?
up the no truck sign, yes, I'll do anything you like.
Okay, well, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Number E on the agenda is going to be residents of Cobblestone Drive, traffic-related safety concerns on Cobblestone. And I think Chris and Phil are going to speak to it. And again, your full names, please, and your addresses.
Okay. My name is Phil Hickstra, and I'm at 42 Cobblestone Drive in Paris.
Chris Stewart, 101 Savannah Ridge Drive, Paris, Ontario.
Your Worship, Mayor Bailey, councillors, staff, and residents. I speak tonight as one of many concerned citizens of the Cobblestone area to share with you what it means to live in an area that has undergone quite a bit of change, how this change affects many aspects of life, and some suggestions drawn from personal experience how another nearby municipality has dealt with a similar situation. In other words, I will attempt to put a human face on the situation. For Mary, my wife, the realization of how our neighborhood had changed occurred when she looked up Cobblestone Drive one morning and counted 40 cars lined up to access Rest Acres. On another date, on the 18th of the same month at 8:50 in the morning, the traffic extended in a solid line from Sacred Heart School to the corner with Rest Acres. Or was it the time she had to wait 5 minutes to make a left-hand turn onto Rest Acres? Not a figurative 5 minutes, but a literal, let's put a clock on it, 5 minutes. Or was it trying to back up out of our driveway? Or was it the speed that some vehicles use to race down Cobblestone Drive? It doesn't matter, you get the idea. The area has changed. November the 8th of this year was the date when it hit home for me that the neighborhood had changed. Cobblestone Drive was no longer a quiet suburban street. About 10 in the morning, while crossing Granville Circle at Sacred Heart School, a car came round the corner, sped by me, turned left onto Cobblestone, and went on its way. I had walked well into the intersection, was crossing at an area clearly marked as a school crossing, and she didn't see me until she was by me. A close call, lots of traffic, lots of speed, lack of signage even in the school zone, an elevated school parking lot with lots of cars in that blocks view for motorists and pedestrians. I was lucky. It could have ended up worse. It is indeed a place waiting for an accident to happen. At times of the day, our street is jammed with traffic. At other times, vehicles whiz by at high speeds. There is continuous noise. Many of our neighbors have expressed concern to our councillors, and Councillor John Bell has been very active in attempting to help us. Some of us have written letters of concern to Mayor Bailey, as well as seeking assistance from municipal staff. A recent petition regarding traffic concerns was supported by 78% of cobblestone owners, all to little avail to this date. Right now, my neighborhood, focused on Cobblestone Drive, is the center of a large amount of construction activity. The seemingly endless work on King Edward diverts traffic through the area. The incomplete status of Arlington as a relief or alternate route focuses all the traffic down one street, Cobblestone. The large-scale and continued residential development along Arlington, Gibbons, Granville Circle have all added construction, service, and worker vehicles to the area. On top of that, the two elementary schools have become large and growing traffic generators in the area. What can be done? The municipality could opt to continue the present course and do little remedial work and hope that once residential construction is finished in the area, that once Arlington is built as a relief road, or the roundabouts on Rest Acres are built in 2020, then all will be well. That congestion will disappear, that gridlock to and from the schools will be gone, the noise will be gone, the high speeds will be a thing of the past. I believe that's a misplaced hope. I would suggest that proactive solutions are what we need. I believe that measures such as those proposed by Councillor John Bell in his motion on October 20th, 2019 should be reconsidered. Lower speed limits, improved signage, including stop signs at the school crossings where I almost met my end, speed humps, electronic speed notification, and increased enforcement would all be helpful in slowing the speeds in this area. As an example of what can be done along the lines suggested by Councillor Bell can be found in nearby Ayr. Hilltop Drive in that community also acts as a shortcut, potentially moving traffic around the center of Ayr towards Cambridge. Hilltop also is the center of a residential area and is focused on a school. 5 stop signs slow traffic. 2 speed humps in the southern entry of Hilltop signal to the driver to slow down. There's a posted 20-kilometer-per-hour sign at a curve in the middle of the residential area, and a painted slow sign on the pavement near the school. 1 stop sign is located right at the school. None of these are terribly expensive actions, and in combination are effective in slowing traffic and encouraging drivers to avoid this area as a shortcut. Now, compare that to our situation on Cobblestone. Drivers entering my neighborhood from King Edward encounter 1 stop sign, 1, until they get to Rest Acres. There are no speed humps, no reduced speed limits near the curve where I almost met my end. There are no painted slow signs on the pavement, nothing to provide friction to drivers and slow them down. In the Cobblestone neighborhood, the thinking seems to be that there is one priority in designing the roadscape: move cars rapidly through the area. In the Hilltop area of Ayr, slowing down traffic for the safety of pedestrians is paramount, which raises the question, which is more important, people or cars? And this is respectfully submitted on behalf of the residents of Cobblestone Drive by myself and my wife, Mary, and I'll give you a copy of that. Okay.
Thank you. So the part that I want to bring to it is a little more of the factual side of it. Recently, there was some speed spy data that was collected during October, and the residents are actually pretty happy. We feel validated that what we have been saying, what we have been seeing, has now been validated through data that was provided by the County of Brant, and honestly, it's worse than what we thought it was. For example, there's 2,785 vehicles on average per day traveling on the road of Cobblestone alone. In the city of Toronto, that would be considered a connecting road. I've been told that Cobblestone Drive is considered a connecting road, but to the residents, that seems kind of strange because the road actually ends at 2 schools. So we're not exactly sure what it's connecting to. In Toronto, connecting roads usually bring many roads together out to like a highway or a larger road, not to 2 elementary schools. Also, just to put this into a little more of a numbers base, at certain times of the day, the 85th percentile number of the speed is 70 kilometers per hour. It's currently a 50. We would like to see it a 40. But most of the time, on average, the 85th percentile of speed is 57 kilometers an hour. We consider that too fast in our subdivision. And just some per day numbers from the speed spy data. This is an average over 9 days. 216 vehicles travel between 60 to 70 kilometers an hour. In the 71 to 80 kilometer an hour bracket, we see 17 of those vehicles a day. Keeping in mind, this is like a residential road. And then, believe it or not, 1.5 times per day on average, we see vehicles traveling between 80 and 90 kilometers per hour. If you sit down and actually think about that, how fast that is in a residential area, if you actually sat on a front lawn and watched that vehicle drive by you, it is a phenomenal amount of speed. Cobblestone is only 717 meters long. At that speed, that vehicle travels the entire length of that road in virtually no time at all. From the research that I've done, a road the size of Cobblestone's, the calculated time that it should take somebody to cross that road is 8 seconds. So when somebody's traveling at a speed of anywhere near that, or even 60 to 70, somebody would look and see a vehicle 250 meters away, which is 25% of the way down the road. By the time they're not even across the road, that vehicle is already on top of them. If that person is texting or not paying attention or thinks that they're going to gather some speed, the probability of them being hit becomes very high. So let's talk about stopping distances. When you're traveling 90 kilometers an hour, it takes 81 meters to stop. In house distance, that's 5 property lengths that it would take you to stop. 60 kilometers an hour, which is basically the average of what everybody's driving, is a little over 3 house lengths. There's a lot of people who cross this road to get to the mailbox, a lot of people who cross the road to get to their neighbors. These speeds and these distances just don't jive in this neighborhood. One thing I wanted to talk about as well is survivability of a vehicle strike. At 30 kilometers an hour, you have the average person has a 93% chance of surviving that accident. At 60 kilometers an hour, which is the average of what people drive through our subdivision, the chance of survivability drops to half, to 45%. And for that 1.5 persons per day who are traveling at 80 to 90 kilometers an hour through our subdivision, the chance of survivability is technically 0, but they assign it a 1% because there is every now and again somebody who survives it. So what do we want to do? All of us have gotten together on the street. 41 out of the 49 residences on Cobblestone got together, which is 83% of us. And we did a petition and a survey of what we want to see done. 97% of us are in favor of lowering the speed to 40 kilometers an hour. And this does many things. One, it increases our chance of survivability of being hit. But 2, it brings a peacefulness to a neighborhood. It brings a reasonable enjoyment to the neighborhood. Right now, when we sit outside of our homes, the speed of the vehicles is so loud and overpowering that when you're having a conversation, you actually have to stop and wait for the cars to go. And it's getting harder and harder with this volume of traffic that we're seeing. 78% of us are in favor of speed humps, and these are mentioned in the Brant Safe Streets program, so we don't see it as a big issue to have them implemented. 91% of us are in favor of radar signs. And this was conducted before you guys actually installed them. So again, you know, thank you where thanks is due that they have been done. And honestly, they have had an impact. I've been out there watching. I know John Bell's been out there. I know some other residents. They are having an impact. I'm not going to say that's the solution yet. It's early days with these, but they are having an impact, which leads us to believe that anything we do does have an impact. 89% of us are in favor of the centerline delineators. These are also mentioned in the Safe Streets program. Interestingly enough, 0% of us were in favor of leaving it in the current condition. So what would we like to do? There's a proposal brought forth by John Bell, and there's also a proposal brought forth by the city. And both of them are very similar, but what we're trying to stress is this is specifically Cobblestone Road we're talking about. Cobblestone Road is not the only road in the subdivision. It is not unique in the way that people only drive a certain way down Cobblestone, and then once they turn off, they just drive completely calm and under control. It's a problem in the entire subdivision. The subdivision is only growing. It's getting larger and deeper, more vehicles. Other subdivisions are growing. More people are coming into the schools to drop their kids off to school, sorry. So we would like to see the entire subdivision as a 40. We don't want to have certain areas that are 40. We want this solution, whatever the solution is, to be subdivision wide, but obviously focus on Cobblestone. We're from Cobblestone. That's, you know, we're going to speak up there first. And then also we want to see enforcement. Interesting enough, since my wife is on maternity leave, since the speed spy data has been released, we haven't seen any increased police presence. We haven't even really seen police. We're not sure if they're in hidden cruisers or in a helicopter above, but we cannot see them. The speed spy data is actually very interesting because it targets specific hours of the day that the speed is extreme, the volume is extreme. So we believe that if for a very low percentage of that police force's time, they could be spent with a big impact. And that's also that's also the time of day when the road's most traveled. So getting those police out there sends a message to other people to let them know. So we're really asking that the police come. We've called them numerous times, and it just doesn't seem to be happening. But now with the data, I don't know how they can deny that this is an issue. And that's basically
Time is becoming a bit of a problem for you here.
Awesome. I just finished.
Thank you. Not that you're not going to be heard later on in the agenda, believe me. Are there any questions to the delegation, realizing or noting the fact that they're on the agenda very shortly for a lot of discussion? So, but if there's any questions to this delegation, seeing none, thank you for your presentation, and we'll probably hear from you in a few minutes. I thought all the extra emails and letters were because Christmas was getting close. I did get all your letters, and so you are being heard. F on the agenda is the delegation from Mount Pleasant. And just your full name and address for whoever's going to be speaking, please. Thank you.
My name is Rhoda, and I'm from Mount Pleasant. Is that sufficient?
That's good.
Okay. I live in Mount Pleasant. I've been there now for approximately 15 years. So 15 years of being there, being, a steward of the land, enjoying where I live. And I'm here today as a representative of my area of Mount Pleasant. I live on McGill. Just what's a concern we have in opposition to a proposed cell phone tower that is coming up, and it's in a beautiful natural area. There's a few concerns that we have with this cell phone tower. First of all is the aesthetic value of the area and the opposing value of the cell phone tower that will be there. It's a beautiful area, lots of nature, and to have a tower there, it doesn't really suit at all. It's not an industrial area, it doesn't fit. Looking out, I see trees, I see my neighbors, I see my community. And to look and see a tower is something that we, the people that we spoke with, have an issue with. In particular, there's one person that we communicated with, and in the back of her house, there's a beautiful view, and now there's a possibility of that being obstructed with a tower. It goes against why initially we decided to move to the area. I mean, we chose to be in a country setting, and now it's like certain things that don't suit, don't fit, are showing up that don't make sense. As well, affecting not just the aesthetics, but the secondary impact that will have, okay? Another concern some of us have that we spoke with is potential health issues. Some of the residents want some time to properly understand, educate themselves about that. We don't feel like we had that. There is a possibility of having some expert information, and we just want some time to have that information, to consult and to talk. And one of the other issues we have, I guess one of the bigger issues we have, is the issue of community, and more specifically what community means. It means a common unity. And there are people who we spoke with who really did not have, I guess, an awareness of this tower that was coming up, and were really just surprised with what was happening. To give you an example, if a house is going to be built, we will get information in the mail, and we can read it, and we can understand. And with this tower, which is, I believe, about 65 meters in height, there were many people that were spoken to that were either unhappy about it or just uninformed, didn't really know what was going to happen. And once a tower is there, like I think you all know, it's there. It's not going to go away. So there really isn't a rush to get it there. There's not a rush to bring it there, because once it's there, it's there. So right now we feel we need some time. We need to have more of a common unity, a community, a communication about this tower, and then take it from there. If you listen to some of the themes that we heard tonight in the different people that spoke about environment, about safety, I mean, these are common concerns that we all have in our community. And it's a concern that I'm bringing to you now. We are concerned about our environment, about the aesthetic value, about our health value, but we're also concerned about community. I personally feel that common unity, that, the quaintness of Mount Pleasant and knowing your neighbors and talking to, there's been a gap. And before we move on and it creates animosity, I think we need to kind of slow it down, put some brakes on it, put a stop, and let's just have a conversation and take our time. There is no need to rush. That's it. Thank you.
Are there any questions to the presenter? Councillor Miller?
Just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. I was just reading your delegation request form. It says there has been minimal consultation and most residents are unaware of the proposal. I take it you weren't aware that this matter came up earlier this year and was turned down?
Want to talk in regards to that?
I can speak to that, Anthony Mosca, and Miguel Road as well. No, I mean, if we didn't live within a certain distance from the tower, as you know, you weren't given any communication. I found out some information because I contacted Shared Network Canada. A sign went down at some point, and I wondered why the sign went down, and I contacted them. They said that the county has not supported the tower, which is great. Then another sign came up more recently. But again, in the meantime, if anybody had received any communication, we didn't, or most people did not. I contacted the county again to find out that it was approved. So that's kind of, we would have had maybe some slides if we had more time to prepare, but it's, obviously it's not just us, it's everybody along McGill and a good part of Mount Pleasant where the tower is actually going. I mean, 65 meters times 3 isn't that much of a distance, especially when the tower sits back a little bit in a field. So there may have been communication to some, but not most. And I think that's maybe in the future what could be done a bit better is maybe a more of an effort communicating to a wider, range of residents.
Okay, what I'm getting at is there's a statement in here that there's been minimal consultation. From what I've seen, this one's had twice as much as any other cell tower, including, it was posted in the local media as well. And I've been to many of these cell tower meetings, and there's nobody from the public that attends these. So to say, anyways, like I said, I see that statement, and I'm not sure if I would agree with it, that's all. So, but, okay,
I understand you may not agree with it. I guess living there, we see things, differently, and that's fine. We can have a difference in vantage point and how we see things. There's just, sometimes I guess, like, there's a certain radius that we found out that they will send stuff to. We weren't in that radius, and that's the minimum. And maybe let this be a lesson where maybe we shouldn't do the minimum. Let's go beyond the minimum, and let's communicate with more people just to kind of have a better communication. Even some of the messages that were given, Shared Network Canada continues to work with county. I believe that was what one of the messages said, with no attachment, no information. And then another one is revised location, again, no attachment. So just kind of, I think, having things, again, instead of doing the minimum, kind of going more. We're not professionals at this. It's not something we've had to deal with in the past. Obviously, looking back, it would be, a bit more things we could have pushed at. But just to give you an example, it's very hard for people to, I guess, see things and notice things. We live in an area where a lot of people are well informed, and they did not know. And these are people that maybe have a bit more time than we do, just working full time and having kids and all that, and they weren't aware. So there is something happening there. There is a gap. So that's something we can discuss, I guess, at another time, just for a future, so it doesn't happen again that way to the community.
Any other questions to the presenter? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Oh, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you live on McGill Road. Was anybody on McGill Road circulated about this tower on Mount Pleasant Road?
Not at all.
No, and the reason probably being they have rules and regulations about how many meters within the proposed location that they have to circulate notices actually in your mail, I believe. So that's why you weren't notified. But it's a good thing that your husband picked up on it and got more information. It's just unfortunate that the meeting, I think, that they had is already finished. But we appreciate you coming forward, and your suggestion about notifying more people, I would suggest maybe you should write a letter to Transport Canada and tell them about your situation and ask them why they don't circulate a broader area. Because it's not like a tower is 50 feet high. It is a large structure, and I do understand your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
That ends the delegations. We'll go back now. How do you want to handle the Legion? Motion to Councillor Pierce.
Motion to receive and forward to budget.
Seconder, Councillor Wheat. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Oak Park Road Extension, how do you want to deal with that? Councillor Ferrier?
I'd like to make a motion that, for staff to draft a letter to the city of Brantford to ascertain if there's a willingness to participate in the creation of a regional transit/public transportation task force.
Seeking a seconder? Councillor Bell? Any other discussion? All those, Councillor Gatt? If you could read it one more time, please.
Sure. A motion that staff draft a letter to the city of Brantford to ascertain if there's a willingness on their end to participate in the creation of a regional transit/public transportation task force. And I use the word regional on purpose because it could include, not joint, it could include other municipalities in the region.
We have a seconder, Councillor Chambers?
Just a question, and perhaps Mark can elaborate on this. If I was staff, I would maybe want to know a little bit more about what you're envisioning with the task force as an accompaniment to the letter to the city, and maybe you could just elaborate on that, and that would give staff a little bit of an indication to flesh out what we're asking them to do.
Well, first, I just want to ascertain if there's an interest in some sort of exploratory committee, might be a better word, or task force on ways that we could connect our transit and public transportation plans, because I think both are in need of some connection, or at least discussion about how to connect them. I spoke, again, I mentioned this, I spoke to a councillor from Brantford today who expressed an interest in this, and I've spoke to other councillors from Brantford, and I know you have as well, and people around this table who've expressed some interest in more of a tripartite or larger regional idea about how we get traffic flowing. I've also spoken to our MPP, Will Bauma, who used to sit at this table, who suggested that it'd be a good idea if us and other regional communities get together to discuss transit and public transportation asks and goals in a more fulsome manner than we do currently. Maybe more focused manner, is what I should say.
All right, I think your motion is clear. We have a seconder. Any other questions? Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to support this because I think this is very vague. But I do, and I'll probably get myself in big trouble for this, but I do support what the city is doing in this. They're trying to look after their traffic without forcing it through the county. And I've always supported that, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Councillor Chambers?
Again, through you, perhaps to Mark, I'm wondering if you might comment on, rather than staff send this letter off to the city, whether it shouldn't be discussed a little bit more around either the road committee or the corporate development committee, something that we can understand what we're asking them as a first step. I support doing what you're proposing, but I'm just seeing that if I was staff, I wouldn't know exactly what council wants by that resolution. So it would an intermediate step that a report be presented to the Corporate Development Committee meeting or the Public Works Committee meeting prior to that. And then the recommendation from that committee report would be tabled and sent to the city.
I would recommend it be
Through the chair, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd recommend it be CDC because we all sit at CDC and we don't all sit at Public Works. So I think that would be, for something of this potential size, that this would be a better venue. So a staff report on options. But I guess I was looking at it from the point of view of we might as well ask to see if there's interest before getting staff to work on something. But if we want to get staff to work on something and then see if there's interest, we can take a stutter step that way. It doesn't matter to me.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, yeah, we used to have a county-city suburban road committee, and that was defunct several years ago. But I think it's good to look at regional transportation, and if we did have a discussion at CDC, then everyone could participate. So I would be in favor of that.
Are you prepared to change your?
Sure, I can change my resolution that staff, instead of staff draft a letter to the city, that staff write a report about potential options for a regional transit/public transportation exploratory committee or task force.
Councillor Wheat?
We're getting off topic here. The topic is the Oak Park Road extension, and now we're getting away from it. Right now, we should be dealing with the Oak Park Road extension. And right now, I'm in favor of moving it to receive his information. That Oak Park Road extension is within the city of Brantford, and they were totally within their rights to do their own planning on their own land. We can't be telling them what to do with their own property. I wouldn't want them telling us what to do with Cobblestone Drive.
Councillor Ferrier?
Yeah, with all due respect, I don't want words put in my mouth. I'm not telling Brantford to do anything or not do anything. What I'm asking is if there's an opportunity to sit down to talk about these broader issues, which was brought up in the presentation by the delegate about looking at bigger issues. I'm also bringing in public transportation because we have a system now and there might be synergies between our two communities, and none of that will happen without us getting together to talk about it. So I'm more than open to have it at CDC and have a broader conversation about that. But again, I asked the delegate if that would be something that would be helpful. She expressed a desire to see that. I tried to move it.
Councillor Bell first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on from what Mark has said, I think there's an opportunity here for us. We shouldn't just let this happen. We should understand the alternatives and whether there's something that the county could benefit from and could also benefit the city by working together. And to bring in public transport, I think is an absolute winner. Thank you.
Anything else to be said, Councillor Gatward?
So we could move to receive the presentation from the delegation and ask for a short report from staff, and that any suggestions that any councillor has for that CDC meeting, perhaps they could be forwarded to the general manager just for information.
Councillor Coleman first, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City has got to do an EA. And so that will be our time as a municipality to put our comments in, whether it's with our staff or whatever, because it is taking traffic from the county, which will come from the Burford area, and we'll be getting onto that or whatever. So that will be our time to make our comments. It's going through the due process. So I'm not supporting this motion. I believe we need to receive it and send it on and make our comments at the appropriate time.
Michael, do you have anything to add?
If I could, Your Worship, and I just want to, along with Councillor Coleman said, I think we should remember that the city is committed to doing an environmental assessment, a municipal class environmental assessment. We're always encouraging our residents to submit comments through that, and it could be appropriate for this council, notwithstanding the other discussion, to refer the delegation's materials to that environmental assessment. That means it becomes part of the public record, and it becomes part of they then have the city has an obligation to address it. So I just think that council may want to consider that with all due respect.
Councillor?
But through you to staff, but we could still do the other piece, which is a brief report at CDC about that joint or regional transit transportation.
Michael?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Of course, Council, but I think that one thing that as I said, the EA is an environmental assessment. It's a public process. It's an opportunity for public to submit comments about their concerns with the process. The city's undertaking this one, and County Council has the same opportunity that any member of the public is. And so you've received information regarding it, and it would, I think personally, it would be appropriate for Council to pass that on to the EA process so it becomes part of that public record.
So with that being said, you want to take it back and just refer it back to the city?
Well,
the presentation?
Why don't we deal with the motion that's on the floor,
All right,
vote on it, and then we can have a motion on
Perfect.
her information being
Perfect.
presented, no?
You still have a seconder. Anything else, Councillor Chambers?
Then, Mr. Mayor, an amendment would be in order to amend the motion that the information be forwarded to the EA process. And then it covers everything. I'll make that an amendment to the motion, that the information presented by the delegation be referred to the EA process with regard to the,
Thank you. You've got a seconder in Councillor Miller.
Councillor Miller was just going to say that same thing, so.
Okay, with all that being said, there's nothing else? Madam Clerk, can you read the motion, please?
The motion currently is that the resolution be amended to include that the information provided by the presenter be forwarded to the City of Brantford's environmental assessment process.
Is that chunky enough for you, Mark? Yeah?
Well, that's just the amendment to Mark's.
Yeah. Well, right, but do you want to take anything back before are you okay with leaving your,
Information. We're currently voting on the amendment before we vote on a potentially amended resolution.
all right, let's vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Okay, now we're back to you. Call the vote. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, if you could do Mark's motion, please.
Sure. That staff be directed to prepare a report for the Corporate Development Committee about the possibility of a regional transit/public transportation system, task force, and that the information from the presenter be forwarded to the city's environmental assessment process.
Any questions? Everything's clear? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. What do you want to do with the Watts Pond delegation? Councillor Coleman? Thank you. Seeking a seconder. Councillor Wheat. Any other discussion? Councillor Howes?
I don't sit on Public Works, and neither does the other councillor for Ward 2, so just a question. The delegation was requesting two specific different things. One was to prohibit trucks on Watts Pond Road, which I understand requires a transportation master plan to change a prohibited truck route. And the second part was about signage. So through by sending this to Public Works, can we receive direction back to the entire council on what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question, I think, probably through you to Michael. Public Works, a little while ago, I brought forward a motion to review the bylaw that determines which routes trucks can go through in Paris. So the whole of the north of Paris was done, the south of Paris wasn't. Do we really need to go through a master transportation plan to take the action that Councillor Howes was just talking about?
Through your worship, and Mr. Walton can help me out on this. It's my understanding that the council can encourage trucks to go through certain routes through truck routing, but to ban trucks, to actually prohibit trucks, you need to do an environmental assessment, because because there's an economic impact to that to users. So you can encourage trucks, you can identify a truck route and say trucks should use this area. But in order to actually say trucks can't use this area, you require an environmental assessment. So the Transportation Master Plan meets the outline or the requirements of an environmental assessment. And so that's why, in order to ban trucks, we would have to do an environmental assessment, or in this case, a Transportation Master Plan.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That wasn't clear to me when we talked about it in Public Works, and I had assumed that since we already had a bylaw in existence, or maybe you can tell me that the bylaw was the product of an earlier EA, in which case I'll shut up. But that wasn't clear to me. Could you just clarify how that first bylaw came into effect? Was it as the result of an EA? And if it wasn't, why can't we just follow the same process?
Mr. Chair, I can't speak to the truck use bylaw. It could have been legacy from the townships, but unless Mr. Walton knows that answer, I don't, well, we can certainly research, but again, it is our understanding, and us for to legally ban trucks from a road, we do have to go through a public process. The public has to have an opportunity to put forward input, as well as the businesses that operate trucking or that expedite their materials through trucking. So.
Anything to add?
Through the mayor to council. Not really. We don't know, I don't know the history. It certainly predates me as to when the previous bylaw was passed. But I think as the CAO has pointed out, these things, they do have implications for more than just the residents on those particular streets. The traveling public, the trucking companies or whatever, they all have a say in what is the roads that can be used. And that's why you have to use public processes to get to the final solution, and then council can make a decision.
Everyone's happy? So what is my motion for Watts Pond? Who made the motion? Councillor Coleman, your seconder was Councillor Chambers? No? Councillor Wheat? Any other discussion? Councillor Chambers?
Just a question, perhaps through you to the CAO or the general manager. The delegation registered a sense of urgency about signage and that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering if we can put a kind of a time frame on a report, one cycle or something like that, and then it's not looked at as sloughed off and come back in 6 months or something like that. I think that's been, the delegation indicated that was a problem in the past. So I'm wondering if a one cycle time frame couldn't be applied.
Councillor Coleman, are you all right with that? Yeah? Everyone's clear? All those in favor? Thank you. What are we going to do with Cobblestone Drive, knowing that we're going to hear from them very shortly? Councillor Bell. Thank you. Seeking a seconder. Councillor Pierce, any conversation? All those in favor? Thank you. We've dealt with the climate change piece. What do you want to do with the people from Mount Pleasant? How do you want to handle their requests? Councillor Miller?
I'll refer it to the planning report.
Thank you. Seeking a seconder. Councillor Ferrier, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We're now at number 5, adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. Councillor Coleman.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, moved by myself, second by Councillor Howell, approval of the minutes from the previous meeting of October 22nd, 2018 be approved.
Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? None. Number 6A. These are the matters that have been deferred from the October council meeting by Councillor Bell. And please note that Councillor Bell's, we only tabled it. We never nixed it. We never said no to anything. It was truly only ever tabled to give us time to bring back the reports that you're going to hear about tonight. So with that being said, what do you want to do with 6A? Councillor Bell.
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not sure of the process, but I would like to bring that motion back onto the floor. But do I need to do that? Perhaps the clerk
No,
could
it's already on the floor.
So
And it has a seconder in Councillor Pierce. It was only tabled. It was never nixed. It was never torn apart nor decided against. But thank you for the mail anyway. Councillor Chambers first.
Yes, I'm glad you clarified that, Mr. Mayor. The motion actually was to table for a report, and I rather than deal with the motion, what should be done, in my opinion, is to look at the report and then deal with the motion, because we'd be in the same position if we deal with the motion without having discussed the report. So it's from what I understand, the italics number 2 is the report and a recommendation from the report. So if we could discuss that, and that would encapsulate some of John's motion, and that's how it should be done. That was the intent of the tabling motion.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, there's two reports, actually. The first one deals with the traffic calming measures. The second one deals with speed limits in school zones. And I believe all those are in the original motion. And there's two lengthy reports here that address many of the issues. So I agree with Councillor Chambers.
Councillor Chambers?
And that having been said, Mr. Mayor, I would be prepared to move the recommendations in 6A2, recognizing that amendments can be made to that, to perhaps Councillor Bell wishes to add components from his notice of motion into that, and then it would be move forward that way. So if that would be in order, I would move that the recommendation 6A2, realizing that amendments can be made and other remedies can be added to that.
So, point of information.
Sorry,
6A1. 6A2 is also related. It's the limit of speed zones and speed in school zones.
Oh, okay.
So I believe you mean 6A1.
I'm sorry, I was thinking
Please go
that-
through the chair, Councillor LeVere, sorry.
My apologies, I was thinking that John's motion was 6A1, and I'm seeing that it's 6A1, so where I sit 2, say 1.
Thank you. Councillor Ferry, do you have something to say?
Is that motion on the floor now?
He's just put it, no, we're still discussing it.
Sorry, I'll wait for a seconder.
Councillor Wheat.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would, in order to assist my fellow councillor, Mr. Chambers, I would suggest that you combine both 6A1 and 6A2. Combine them both into one, which will address, in combination, the business referred from previous meeting.
Councillor Pierce first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, no, I think 1 and 2 are different entities here, and I think I don't believe that 6A2 is part of the original motion that Councillor Bell had there. I think 6A1 speaks to that motion, and I would be happy to second that motion to get that on the table, and then we can figure out what is left after this report of what is to do with the other motion.
Councillor Chambers?
That's my understanding, and that would enable Councillor Bell or any other councillor to make amendments to 6A1.
Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I would like to say a few words, if I may. A month's a long time in municipal politics, as I've found. You can engage a lot of people in that time, and I want to thank the residents of the Granville community. I have to get my terminology correct. It's the Granville subdivision, not the Cobblestone subdivision, but the people know who I'm talking about. They have come together. They've recognised a common issue. They've set about trying to raise their concerns in an appropriate way by writing to the council. They've also taken the step of becoming, in many cases, part of our Brant Safe Street strategy by becoming pace car drivers, so I support them for all of that. And I do want to thank the county for moving on and putting up those speed signs. But there's a couple of things that are worth just reflecting on. In the last month, we got some new speed spy data, and it, on the one hand, is helpful. On the one hand, it's concerning. Regarding Irongate Drive, it actually has reduced my concern a little. Regarding Cobblestone, it's actually increased my concern. We have more than half of the drivers going down Cobblestone who are exceeding the speed limit. We have a number of drivers that are actually exceeding the speed limit between 30 and 40 kilometres per hour. And as Chris Stewart, one of the presenters, mentioned, should somebody get hit by a car going at 80 or 90 kilometres per hour, it's almost a certain fatality. So we need to be aware of that. The principal of the Sacred Heart School is actually written as well, so it's not just local residents. I think just to refresh everybody's memory, there are 850 kids in those two schools at the end of the road there. That's actually more than the population of Oakland. It's almost more than the population of Scotland. And these are vulnerable people. There are kids walking to school. I've watched them many times. There are kids that come out of school at recess and they walk down the road back to Tim Hortons. They are at risk, not just at the coming to school, leaving school times, but throughout the day. And the indication from the speed spy data is it's not just first thing in the morning when the school is coming in or last thing when the school is going out. It's even at weekends. And I think we have to look very hard at the residents of the the Granville subdivision who need to ask themselves, what can they do as a community to make this better? In late October, when the mayor was away, I stood in for him at the Cobblestone Elementary School to give county support to a pilot project to encourage active transportation around our schools. And that was really about kids walking to school or cycling to school. So that's really, in my mind, up the ante in this whole exercise about making sure that we have a safe zone around the Cobblestone schools. Why did I suggest 40 kilometres across the whole area? Well, I think it sends a big signal. It's also reflecting a practice that we see in many other communities. Just recently in Kitchener has assigned 3 quite significant subdivisions to a new 40 kilometre per hour speed limit. They admit they don't know whether it will work, but they want to find out what happens when you make that change. And when they add on to it the kind of electronic speed monitoring that we've got and increased enforcement, their belief is that it will ultimately bring speed down and make it safer for everybody, children, drivers, seniors, and other pedestrians. I think the measures that have been proposed by the county staff to put a 3-way stop at the end of Cobblestone Drive is an essential. I was there again yesterday, and I've seen just so many times the difficulties that the crossing guard experiences in managing safely that intersection. I would like to see that 40-kilometre proposal extended all the way down Cobblestone, and the Cobblestone residents, I think, have made their own plea for that and have given their own reasons for it. I think it's appropriate to do a traffic calming study, and that was one of the recommendations I had in my initial report. My only question is, how long will that take to do? I don't want to wait until the middle of 2021 when the master transportation plan is ready to find out something we could have learned much more quickly and taken more action on more urgently. I still would like to, I think I would like to make an amendment to the motion, if the motion is already on the floor, to extend that 40-kilometre per hour limit all the way down Cobblestone and to put a time on when we will get the traffic calming study reported back to us. I leave that to staff to determine that. Thank you.
Councillor Ferrier.
I would second that amendment about the 40 kilometers all the way down Cobblestone. But I was wondering if I could speak through you to staff and ask them why they didn't recommend that in the initial report. Is that okay right now, or is that something we should wait for?
Michael?
Through you, Your Worship, our premise in this is that speed limits, and the Safe Street Strategy says this, is that a speed limit on people will drive based on the design of the road. That's a philosophy that we follow. That's a philosophy that's embraced in the Ontario Traffic Manual, which is our guideline. And so Cobblestone Drive was designed as a collector road, and it was designed to move fairly large volume of traffic at a fairly consistent speed to expedite traffic through the area. So, certainly it would be my suggestion. So we looked at the definition of the road system. Mr. Walton could add to that, and we identified areas where we think the speed limit would be reasonable given the design of the road. And we didn't recommend any speed limit adjustments where it wouldn't be reasonable, where we couldn't encourage drivers, we couldn't change the behavior of drivers to drive at a lower posted speed limit than the road is designed. A possible alternative for council to consider is rather than making a speed limit that won't be achieved and that then puts it to enforcement to manage with very limited enforcement resources, as council has discussed recently, would be to defer that decision on cobblestone until the traffic calming study is done, because then we can incorporate road design to force people basically to drive slower. And in terms of the timing on the traffic calming study, I think we're prepared to move that into late winter. We could bring that. Traffic calming is new to us, I'll acknowledge. We have no in-house talent in this, so we're looking at building some in-house talent. This is growth space for the municipality. We have some consulting firms that we can draw on, but they're busy. This is a very big topic for the municipal sector right now. So I think we could have a traffic calming plan in front of council in the mid to late winter, and we'll get it quicker if we can, because one of the things I'm interested in, we have budgeted figures for the Brant Safe Street strategy, including some permanent traffic calming initiatives, and we need a couple of projects for next year, and this could be a great project. So again, we haven't recommended extending the 40-kilometer-hour speed limit outside of what we've proposed that we think will work, because the road design, we believe, won't achieve that. It's not going to work. So then it falls to enforcement, and we this council, this staff, we don't control enforcement. So hopefully that makes sense.
I guess my thoughts on that, with respect, is that if we do lower that to 40 kilometers, we could always change it when a traffic study comes in, but that actually gives the police more powers to enforce speeding on that road, because the fines become stiffer if the speed limit is lower. I know driving down Cobblestone, it's a residential area with a big open wide road that doesn't have paint on it, and it's very easy to go very fast. And I just wonder if just doing one small block is 40, it's almost like a pillow at the end of a long run. And I don't know if that'll be effective or be seen to be effective at this time. I'd like to maintain my seconding on Councillor Bell's amendment and see if that would get support of this council.
I'd like to just remind the council that you really do have to go through the chair. It makes it easier for the clerk to take the minutes.
How was I don't know how I wasn't in that case. I was looking at the whole room, but I was directing that to you.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
And if the amendment is to make all of Cobblestone at 40 kilometers an hour, I support that. And I think that would, the difference between 50 kilometers an hour and 40 kilometers an hour and moving traffic is minimal. They'll get to the end of the street 30 seconds later. So I think that basically does send a message to the drivers that that isn't a thoroughfare, it's a residential street that is acting as a conduit. In order that people pay attention to the 40-kilometer-mile zone, you can post it as 40, but you're going to have to do a little bit more, and this is where paint on pavement can play a huge impact on making people recognize that it's 40. You can write 40 kilometers an hour on the street if you want, and people see that. Enforcement is important, and part of the recommendation is that the police department be advised. So that's covered. So I support the amendment for 40. And the other thing I'll say is that once the traffic calming study is done, I look at that as the traffic calming study for the whole subdivision. And it seems really rather foolish to have the main street 40 and the side streets 50. They should all be 40. If you're making one, you go slow to the side streets and then you can speed. That's crazy. So as a residential subdivision, more and more residential subdivisions are being posted and at 40, and this one is a candidate for that. So I support the amendment and look forward to the calming study, which probably will indicate that the whole subdivision should be 40.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. So a couple things here. I think it's quite evident with the feedback we have from the residents in the area that there is a problem there. But I think the problem is bigger than just council. The problem is it includes council, it includes the school boards, it includes enforcement, and it includes people who live in the neighborhoods. Now that we have some hard data with our speed spies, it's absolutely telling us information that is factual. As Councillor Bell said, I was actually surprised myself that on Iron Gate, the 85th percentile of people are actually less than 50 kilometers an hour. I was one of the ones that thought that they were speeding down there as well. The factual data tells us that's not the case. It does tell us the case that there is speeding on Cobblestone, which is what the residents have been telling us. I think with what's happening here with making the Granville and Cobblestone intersection a full three-way stop, I think that's going to help a lot. I think with the 40 kilometer an hour sign as is posted in the report, I was a little curious about that myself, so I had a conversation with staff, and the thought process was the fact that when you were going down Cobblestone and you saw a 40 kilometer an hour sign for that last little block there, that's putting into your mind that you are coming into a 40 kilometer an hour zone to slow down. I think and don't get me wrong, because I agree that we need to do something here, but I think throwing everything at it is going to confuse things. I think what we're doing here, and now with returning back to staff and collecting more data and understanding how things are going, that will give us the next step. I would be in favor of expanding that 40 kilometer an hour zone, but I think at this point in time, if we were to do with what's proposed here or add that 40 kilometer an hour zone, that's going to tell us with future data, is it helping? Now, earlier on, we were kind of confusing report 6A1 and 6A2. Well, report 6A2 tells us, and this is for North Ward, it tells us the facts are that even when the flashing 40 kilometer an hour sign is there, people are still driving more than 50 kilometers an hour. So we need to be careful, as the CAO said, in the sense of just because we put it 40 kilometers an hour doesn't mean people are going to drive 40 kilometers an hour. They will drive to the speed of the road. Again, I'm in favor of the report that's here. Let's do this to get something done immediately and then understand how that's going to go. And I understand the folks in Cobblestone have been putting up with the King Edward construction. That has just added to it. The Arlington exit there, that's just added to it. As we know with the Arlington exit, it's been stated that we don't own that last portion of land. That will be opened, I'm assuming, in the springtime when the next phase of that development starts. I believe if you're by it today, they've got the curbs and everything on King Edward, so that's going to alleviate some of the traffic as well. So I think with the perfect storm calming down a bit and the addition of a three-way stop and the 40 kilometer an hour zone, I think that is a very good start, and we'll see where the actual data sends us next.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bell suggested 40 kilometers an hour. And I wonder why 40, maybe we should go with 30. And I, not being facetious here, but in Toronto, you go down some of those streets and they're 30 kilometer an hour with I swear, a speed bump every house. But I would rather, and I think Councillor Pierce, I like what Councillor Pierce said. I think, let's just go with the staff report, and they're going to look at it. They will look at it, and it may come out to be 30 and not 40. So let's just leave it as, I support leaving it as is, and let's see what comes out of the data. Let's see what comes out of the traffic calming, and go from there. And it's not that far away. It's not 10 years off. It's not 2 years off. It's next year. It's coming soon.
Anyone else have anything to say, Councillor Gatward?
Just that they'll be finished the paving on King Edward Street this Friday, so that will hopefully take some of the traffic that's coming through away from this subdivision and will help the situation as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can I hear your amendment again, please?
Yeah, the amendment to the existing motion is that we extend the 40 kilometre per hour speed limit all the way down Cobblestone Drive.
Is there any more conversation, any more comments before we vote? For the whole street. Councillor Laferriere.
To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
The other thing I want folks to know, and everybody who's voting on this, is that pedestrian piece is so important. And I want to thank staff, first of all, for, we'd brought up last time this came around, well, if the car data doesn't suggest certain issue items, like the end of Cobblestone being a three-way traffic stop, that could we look at it as from a pedestrian issue, from a safe walking issue? And I want to thank them for being creative and looking at those options, and I think that's incredibly helpful. And all the way down Cobblestone, and this speaks to the amendment, there are large groups of kids who do before school and after school programs between the daycare in the Tim Hortons Plaza and they walk to and from the elementary schools. So you'll see a train of 20, 30 kids walking all the way up and down Cobblestone or some of these other side streets, in addition to those going home, regularly during the busiest times, going to and from that daycare. So again, that 40 all the way down, I think could be justified from that pedestrian idea of these long trains of kids with sometimes only 2 adults. Again, something to think about as we vote.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to say? No. I think when Councillor Bell first brought this forward, I think that it was taken not in a hostile manner, but I think Councillor Bell sounded like his little world was worse than everyone else's little world. And coming from a world in St. George, we have terrible traffic and terrible speeding. We have just as much trouble in St. George. And I think what happened when you came to council, I think people sort of thought that you were thinking that you should be dealt with and only you, when we all have bad issues wherever we live, whether it's Oakland, Scotland, Mount Pleasant. I felt badly for these people tonight from McGill Road. I used to live on McGill Road. I know what they're talking about. But I think the way we have to handle it is exactly the way you've brought it forward. These people have put a lot of time and a lot of effort. You've put in a lot of time and a lot of effort. And when it's time to deal with St. George with the same problems, or Scotland or Oakland or Mount Pleasant, we'll do the same thing. But I think when you first approached council, it seemed like you needed special treatment. And I think that's why you got tabled, is because it might have seemed like you thought you were in a little bit more trouble than maybe some other people, and there's trouble everywhere. So I'm glad that we took the time. I'm glad you got tabled and not defeated, because I think this vote might be different. With that being said, I don't know if there's anything else to be said before we call the vote. Councillor Chambers?
You're calling the vote on the amendment, because I have another amendment after this one.
Let's call the vote on the amendment first. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Chambers, you have another amendment.
Yes, a further amendment, and the amendment will be, and I'll get help from the clerk on this, that staff present engineering options to reinforce the speed limit changes. What I mean by that is that it's fine to change the speed limits, and it's fine to ask the police to come out, but the police can't be there every minute of the day. And there are things that can be done engineering-wise, i.e. pavement painting, for example, to reinforce in people's minds that it is a 40 kilometers hour zone. And there's all kinds of things they can do engineering, from pylons to paint, and I would like some options to reinforce the speed limit at 40. One of the options is already in there, and that's the electronic speed eye, or whatever you call them, and that's an engineering option, but there are other ones that may impact. The last thing I want to do is change the speed limits to 40 and then nobody follow them. So that's my amendment, that staff be requested to prepare options to ensure that the 40 kilometer an hour speed limit changes are met.
Seeking a seconder, Councillor Bell, Councillor Ferrier.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if by making it doesn't have a point here, but it says here, in that strategic initiative staff be directed to provide communications and education in this area, including use of the schools to reach all families, including those that live outside the subdivision. I'm wondering if the same idea might be reached by just taking out the word strategic initiatives and putting in that staff be directed to, because that would include, it could include engineering staff and other staff. I wonder if that might be an elegant solution.
Councillor Chambers?
I like my recommendation that that's a concrete action, that staff is going to present options and we can discuss it further.
All right, he has a seconder. Let's vote on all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Pierce?
So we're back to the report as amended, correct?
We're back to Councillor Bell. Oh, we're back to the report. That's right, that's right.
The
Staff
report
reflections,
as
yes.
amended, as
That's right.
amended, as amended, amended.
As amended,
Okay.
as amended.
So, if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, on the Granville Circle that's going 40 kilometers an hour, is that, because Granville Circle technically goes out to King Edward. So is that, am I understanding from this that from the point of entry off of King Edward into Granville Circle, we are now going to be 40 kilometers an hour through there as well as Cobblestone?
Everywhere. Everywhere. Side streets, circles, exits from
No,
circles.
no, it's Granville Circle. That's the name of the street. That,
Right.
it circles around the schools.
That's right.
That's been
But that's gonna
proposed to
be-
go 40 kilometers.
Right.
Okay, but what I want to understand is on Granville Circle, there's a piece of that that goes, I guess it's on the, what would be the northwest side by Cobblestone School there, that goes out to King Street, King Edward. I just want to make sure that that is also 40K as you enter into the subdivision.
Why would it be any different?
If you look at Granville Circle,
Yes.
it's obviously, it's a circle, but
It's a
there's a leg that comes off it. I
Right.
just want to make sure that that's incorporated as well.
Right. Yeah, the map shows it. Yep, I would think everything would be 40.
So it's right from there. So that's good. Yeah.
Anyone else? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to have Michael clarify, if he would, late winter, can we be more specific, put a date in the record for that, please?
Through you, your worship, I consider late winter to be March-ish. If we can get it home quicker than that, we'll do it, because it allows us to get planning underway, so.
Thank you. March is good.
All right, March is good. Thanks. So we're voting on,
We're voting on the recommendation contained for COU 1938, including a reduction in speed for the entire Cobblestone drive. Oh, jeez.
that's you.
One second here.
That was in stereo.
The stereo came up. Okay, including the entire Cobblestone Drive will be 40 kilometers an hour, and that staff be directed to report on engineering options to reinforce the speed limit changes.
Everyone's clear? Nothing to be added? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Can I also get a motion, please, to receive all the letters that I received as information?
We still have this one, and John's motion we have to deal with somehow too.
All right, all right. All those in favor to receive? Thank you. Clerk said I went through something,
We still have this report,
right?
and John Bell's original recommendation, we have to either withdraw or deal with it somehow.
So we have to deal with number 2, the speed limit school zone. Councillor House.
Move to approve that staff recommendation. If I have a seconder, I'd like to speak to it for a moment, please.
Councillor Ferrier seconded, and Councillor House wants to speak to it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the clerk. Heather, would it be possible to put that on the screen without it being too much trouble? If it's
Number 682.
682?
We still got to do his.
He knows, he's doing that next. It's got to be with John.
Oh, there's some cool air.
This just supersedes it. Well, yeah. It's pretty good. So I wonder if this is still here.
Is that the one?
Yeah, you scroll it down just slightly, please. That's good.
Councillor House.
Thank you. Just the one thing I wanted to point out, and I do really appreciate the staff delivering the speed spy data, which helps us make decisions with real information. So that's Northward School. To the lower right corner, you see the red dot, which is L1. I just want to point out to everybody who maybe didn't catch all this in the report, that was the westbound speed spy location. It is 2 houses away from a 4-way stop. And so people coming off of that 4-way stop from any direction, but then heading west on Silver, 85% of those drivers are hitting 60 kilometers an hour before they hit Northward School in the length of 2 front yards. So that's very valuable information, and I just want to thank staff, and I wholeheartedly support the idea of having the permanent radar signs in place both directions, so that if you're driving like a jerk, there's going to be a sign that tells you you're driving like a jerk, and that may just slow some people down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Laferriere.
Yeah, I agree with Steve on that. Thank you. And through you, I'd also like to, again, reiterate gratitude, but also I think it's really important to note, as our CAO mentioned, we don't have a ton of in-house expertise on this. This is something, part of this is new, traffic calming, we're learning a lot, and staff are really putting their backs into this. I think it's great because we hear this time and time again. We heard it today at the dais. You know, this stuff shouldn't just be about moving cars. It should also be about pedestrian and walkability. And that language is in here. And I think that gives us a lot of leeway. And I think it's very forward-thinking to be including pedestrian and walkability concerns in all of our traffic calming measures. So I'm in support of this. That's why I seconded it. I hope it passes. I think it's good to look at this school by school by school in the future as well.
Anything else to be said? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Which takes us back to Councillor Bell's original motion. Do you want to withdraw it or change it, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that the early discussion and the earlier motion that we all approved addresses most of my concerns. I think I'm comfortable to wait for the traffic calming study and then, if need be, bring forward another motion. So I'm happy to withdraw this one.
So Councillor Bell has just said that he's going to withdraw his previous motion. Councillor Chambers.
Just a suggestion, Mr. Mayor, through you to John. If you leave it tabled, then if the opportunity arises, if something doesn't happen, you can pull it onto the floor again. But if you withdraw, it'll never be seen again. So I would suggest you just leave it tabled.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Chambers for my continuing education in the matters of councils. I will leave it tabled, if that's okay.
Thank you for being so helpful, Councillor Chambers. Boy, oh boy, we're all going to sleep well tonight. So we're going to leave it tabled then. All those in favor? Perfect.
Every now and again, Robert.
We're now going to go to B. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, we received at the last council meeting a letter from Shirley Steedman. She's with the Ontario Horticultural Society and also the local St. George Garden Club. And she raised some very valid concerns in her letters to us. I asked that the clerk bring forward in the addendum the action items that she had suggested. And they're found that letter in your addendum because we really didn't deal with that at the last council meeting. I agreed to check with the GRCA about this matter, and the GRCA fights phragmites, or some people pronounce it phragmites, on their own properties where they have significant investments. I'm not sure what Long Point Conservation Authority's policy is, but they've done extensive work down in Long Point Bay to eradicate these invasive plants that kill other plants and displace the wildlife. I never really realized how important it is to control Phragmites until such time as I got this additional information. And I met with Crystal Allen at the GRCA, and she's the Natural Heritage Supervisor. And she's advised me that a staff member from the GRCA would be happy to meet with any of the 3 garden clubs or any garden club to assist them with plans to control Phragmites on private property. So that's a good thing, and I have her contact information available. The only thing is, we have a lot in the county right in our own road allowances. I've seen them out on Highway 253 on the way to Langford and all along Langford. I've seen them on County Road 18. I've seen them on Highway 24 North. I'm sure some of you have seen them in your wards. I think if we don't do something, they're going to continue to spread and destroy our natural environments. And there's a lot of concern about the environment currently. So she was suggesting in this letter some possible action steps, that Brant County set up a strategy to map out the areas of concern and give us a baseline to monitor in the future. She also gave methods by which you can get rid of Phragmites. It's expensive, and certain areas have to be done differently than land areas. If the Phragmites are in water, you have to treat them differently because you can't pollute the groundwater. Does everybody know what they look like? Is there anybody here that hasn't seen them? They're a tall reed with the big fluffy end. And they spread off and along roadways because in the ditches there's often wet conditions. And that's what they like. And the seeds blow and the birds carry the seeds. And I had a complaint about them earlier this year on Cockshut Road, and I believe there's some on Oakland Road. So they're all over, and the 3 garden clubs, Glenmorris, St. George, and Paris, have endorsed this letter dated October 7th, and they asked that the county put $50,000 in funds for staffing and supplies to initiate the strategy to get rid of these invasive plants. So that's my report, Mr. Mayor, and I would refer the request for the $50,000 to eradicate or help eradicate these plants to our budget process, because I think it's very important that we look at this.
Thank you. Seeking a seconder, Councillor Pierce. Any other questions to Councillor Gatward's research? Councillor Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gatward, do you know if they sell this at, in the stores, nurseries?
Sell Phragmites? No, I don't believe so. They're a very invasive plant, something like when we had the problems a few years back with the purple loosestrife that we fought to get rid of and were fairly successful.
The reason I'm asking, because they say on one of the websites that they still sell it in Ontario garden centers as an ornamental plant. And
I don't know which one.
I'm wondering if that's one of the things we could maybe.
I don't know which ones they would be referring to through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Miller. I know some municipalities have a whole program, like the City of London, to get rid of these. There's others, municipalities that do as well, but I think this is a start, and certainly that's something that the garden clubs, I would expect, who visit those garden centers would be aware of, and hopefully make the owner aware that he's selling something bad for the environment. So there's no garden centers in your area? I'll check out the ones in Ward 5.
Any other comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor to send it to budget? Thank you. Number 7, consent items. Councillor Chambers. Any questions, Councillor oh, there you go. Read it out. I think so.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce. County of Brant request for proposals supply and installation of residential signage be ordered to Brook Signs. Proposed price of 1.7, excluding how much sales tax. Recognizing that's what we're talking.
Any comments, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, does the 1.7 million include all of the signs that we saw in the wayfinding budget, in the wayfinding study, rather?
Alison?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, it excludes the gateway signage, which have to be done separately, and the signage, community identification gateway signage that has MTO implications. So it's only a portion of the budget that was put forward in the decision package for 2019.
Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you again to Alison. I thought the gateway signage was the first signage we would put out. So is this, have we seen an order for the gateway signage already? Have I missed that?
Through you, Your Worship, so staff brought forward the detailed design of which was approved for the gateway signage. We are ready to move forward on it, but it's pending MTO permits.
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't actually have a price that we could put on that or a time when it could be delivered.
Through you, we do have the price, which was identified in the original strategy. However, the timeline is now dependent on getting approval through MTO.
Okay, thank you, Alison.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, we approved some of this last year's budget, and we haven't done any of the signage yet. So I'm wondering if we should extend this project for a year because we're behind a year. The gateway signage, I think you just said was first. Will it be done in the spring?
Alison?
Through Your Worship, that's dependent on when we get the MTO approval for the encroachment agreements to get those put in. The reason that we went ahead with this RFP is because we don't require permits for these family of signs. And in the RFP, it also states that it is dependent on budget approval as well.
Councillor Gatward?
So this is a 5-year signage program that is budgeted over 3 years. Why wouldn't we budget it over more?
Through you, Your Worship, we're proposing that families of signs be done together rather than separating them by community. So for example, if we were doing one class of signs, there was efficiencies in the manufacturing of those signs to do them all at once.
So they'll be manufactured, paid for, but not necessarily installed.
Through Your Worship, that price does include the installation.
So our crews won't be installing them, a contractor will be.
Correct.
And that includes all the signs for the various little communities so that everybody will be consistent?
Through your worship, it does.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the signage? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 7B is Councillor Ferrier. B and C, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Howes, that 7B consent items to be received as information, 7B and C, items 1 through 9.
Does anyone want any of those separated? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 8A, committee reports. Councillor Pierce, Community Service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Howes, that the Community Service Committee report of November 4th, 2019 be approved.
Any questions, Councillor Pierce? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, through you to Councillor Pierce, maybe you can answer. Is this multi-purpose facility at 169, is that one of the 3 future indoor rec facilities talked about in here?
Yeah, it's yeah, that takes Sillaps, that takes Brant Sports Complex, that's one of the 3 that are in there, yes. Is it not in the?
The Paris Lawn Bowling Club's going to
Oh,
be
the lawn
one of
bowling, sorry. No, not the lawn bowling.
Michael, do you want to speak to that?
But, this project was not, this was a separate project. It was a separate master plan that was done for the lawn bowling clubs.
Okay, I'm grateful for this, by the way, so, but this has nothing to do with this? Okay.
Your Worship, my apologies, if I just could. We circulated, the consultant provided us with copies of the 3 facility study because there was questions at the last council meeting, so we've circulated copies of it. It's already been received and approved in principle and referred to the budget, but we wanted everyone to have one. It's a fairly interesting document, so.
You good with that, Councillor Miller?
Yeah, I was good enough, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Pierce? Seeing none, all those in favor to receive, thank you. 8B, the Planning Advisory Committee, Councillor Wheat.
It's moved by myself and seconded by Member Pierce, the Planning Advisory Committee report, November 5th, be approved. And that's the special meeting that we had at the start where we were introduced to the official plan.
Any questions to Councillor Wheat? Seeing none, all those in favor to receive? Thank you. C is the Advisory Committee, Councillor Wheat.
It's moved by myself and seconded by Member Coleman, the Planning Advisory Committee report on November 5th be approved.
Any questions? Councillor Coleman?
Mayor, pull number 6.
Okay. Take number 6. So we're going to approve everything but number 6. All those in favor? Councillor Coleman, you want to speak to number 6?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to support number 6 again. I'm sorry I was not at the last Planning Advisory meeting because I was tied up with other things, but there again, we're going back to this communication problems with senior levels of government. The notices are not getting out far enough. They put little dinky signs up so nobody can read them when you're going down the road at the speed limit because nobody's speeding. And so they're very hard to read, and it's a short little window where these notices are sent out. And I was at the little public meeting they had at the Mount Pleasant, the old fish hatchery, and there was a few people there, but it just does not sit well with a lot of the community. And I know that everybody's got cell in their pocket or whatever, and that's what they rely on. And I know these companies have to have these towers, but there's got to be a better way of communicating with the residents. And that's why I'm not supporting this recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Any other concerns, Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, I'm going to support it in the sense that, as we've talked around this table before, we could extend the notification to, I'm just going to say, a mile. And then somebody that's just over a mile doesn't get it. We could extend it to 2 miles. Somebody just over 2 miles doesn't get it. I don't think that we can ever inform everybody and I think that's why there's certain guidelines that they have to follow. Is there a better way to do it? I believe there may be, but I don't think expanding that area of communication is going to help the matter, because it's just going to cause somebody a little further out to not get the communication. So I will support it at this time.
Anything else to be said? Councillor Miller?
Just extreme frustration that these, as Councilor Coleman says, these little signs are put out, and it's been 4 years since I've asked for bigger signs from planning. I just want to put that on the record. Very frustrating. And what's even more frustrating is this went through the process twice. So people not getting notice, there's no excuse anymore. There really isn't. Having said that, those directly affected, those directly impacted, nobody came and spoke against it at planning, so I will support it.
Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Miller said 4 years ago. I asked for it 5 years ago. So we both have asked for this, larger signs to be on these projects, of any projects, so the public can be notified. Because we all know that you don't have to be living next door to anything to appeal it. And so, but if the notices are made so you can read them, or it catches your attention, and that's why I'm not supporting this, because we don't do a very good job, and whether it's us or whoever it is, of making due note to the public of what's happening.
Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, and I believe probably, most likely, the notices are supplied by the company that is going to put up the tower, not our staff. And the suggestions are well taken. I think that we need to get the message to the powers that be at Transport Canada or the CRTC, who's ever responsible for this whole process. Because if staff doesn't send a letter, or we don't direct staff to send a letter, or you and I don't send a letter wanting bigger signs, it's never going to happen. But Councillor Miller's right. There was no one in here at the planning meeting from Mount Pleasant Road to object. The residents that objected to the other location are happy, and the people here tonight were from McGill Road. They can certainly see it from a distance, but it is what it is.
Councillor Chambers?
Yeah, and I understand where Brian is coming from, and the B part of that resolution is basically, if we agree to the recommendation, that we agree that Brant County is satisfied with the public consultation process and does not require any further consultation with the public. From what I'm hearing, we're not satisfied, and I think that further consultation could be in order, so I won't be supporting the recommendation either, in lieu of the fact that we're not that satisfied with the public consultation, obviously.
Anything else to be said? Call the vote. All those in, Councillor Wheat?
I am going to be supporting it. Just because you're not, I am going to be supporting it, because the consultation process did follow the proper channels. And I'll add to it, how many people right now notice a tower at the intersection of the 403 and Rest Acres Road? How many people notice that tower? 2. That's less than 20%.
Anything else to be said? All those in favor? Opposed? What do we got?
Motion's defeated.
It's defeated.
Okay, so now where do we go from here?
We'll direct staff to.
I need a motion.
Councillor Coleman?
Direct staff to, I'm going to need a clerk's help on this one. to send a letter back that we were not happy with their public consultation on this.
Now, are we going to send that back to, I guess the question is, are we asking the applicant to do something else, or are we, I guess we're informing Shared Network Canada that we were unsatisfied with the consultation on this
I
application?
think we're unsatisfied with the consultation.
Yep. Due to the delegation.
Yep.
Seeking a seconder. Councillor Ferrier. Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, just speaking to that, that's great that we're going to send them that, but what is it? As we said earlier, we need to give specifics as to what we want from this. That's very vague. Like, what are we telling them that we want? All we're saying is that we weren't satisfied in it. I think there's got to be a little bit more meat to it to say X, Y, Z, whatever, right?
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remember when this came up a little while ago, and we had the issue with Burford, and there was a concern about whether we had an appropriate protocol. And I think at the last meeting, Councillor Pierce put a motion on the floor to have the staff look at that. So I think I sense it's premature to say this isn't correct. This item 6B, because we don't actually know what we want, other than what's already written down there, and what's written down there we actually complied with. So I struggle with it.
Councillor Ferrier.
Well, with that being said, through you, Mr. Mayor, we did just vote that it can't be premature if we voted that we don't agree with the consultation process. Maybe the thing we could do is wait to send that letter until such time that the proposal comes back, which we can then refer the organization to the proposal, to the report from staff as to what we'd like to see.
Okay. Everyone's good with that? Well, Councillor Bell.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think following on that, do we need an amendment to what Brian has suggested? That we just defer this item until such time as staff have come back with their report? Because we may actually be shooting ourselves in the foot, as far as I'm concerned.
Maybe Councillor Coleman can just add to it then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The public was here tonight and made a presentation that they were not happy with the public consultation that was on this. They weren't given notice of whatnot. They didn't say they were opposed to the tower. They were opposed to the public consult. They would have just liked to get some input into us. And I think that is why this motion was defeated, because they want to get public consultation in it. And let's let the due process work. So that's what I'm sticking to, is that we send a letter back saying public consultation did not satisfy all the area residents. And that's basically what it is.
Okay, Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaking to the motion here, again, as Councillor Bell said, if we go back to what we were dealing with in the Burford area, that was part and parcel of coming up with the recommendation for staff to do a review of the whole tower protocol. So again, I appreciate where Councillor Coleman's going there, and I think as part of that overall review of tower protocol, we could get things in there as to extended lengths for communication, bigger signs, that sort of thing. But I'm leaning with Councillor Bell here in the sense that if we put forth a motion to say something or put something back to these particular people, and the report comes back and tells us something different, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. So I agree that there is an issue here, and that was the rationale of asking for that report from staff. So I think we need to wait for that report from staff to see what they're recommending, and that might encompass, better communication, bigger whatever, right?
All right, Councillor Wheat.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we're going to send a letter to the powers that be, then we better tell them what we want. Do we want 2 miles, 20 miles, whatever? Remember, we won't make the decision on whether that tower's built or not. We're only talking about the consultation process. And so you can make it really big then, cover all your bases.
I think Councillor Wheat's right. I mean, we saw how heavy-handed they were when they came to present. They weren't asking us really, they were telling us what they were going to do.
That's right.
and we shifted it once and upset them, I think, and now we're just saying we don't like their process, but they are very heavy-handed, and I think Councillor Wheat's right. All we can ask for is all we can ask for. It's going to happen, so I think we should put a distance on it. If you could just change that up, Councillor Coleman. What do you want? What do you want? Okay. What are you suggesting?
I'm not going to, I'm opposed to it, but I'm suggesting
Oh, my
people
goodness.
want to do this. You better decide how many miles you want to extend that. Don't just say you're not happy with it, you better tell them what you want.
Yeah. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, may I go through you to staff to understand the status of the said report, to see
Sure.
where that is?
I think we're at that point.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Ms. Duslin can help me out with this, but, so there was a report requested on the protocol that we use to make decisions on these applications for towers. We're not the approval agency, but we're consulted. And then we have to either, agree that the consultation was appropriate or not appropriate. And I think that's probably one of the check boxes that the applicants have to submit to the CRT if they're going to get a tower. It's probably not the only checkbox. So that report is due in the new year, and it may outline a different protocol, which then you may want to apply this application to,
Right.
which may address some of the concerns that were brought forward by the members of the public. So.
Anything else you could add?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, that's correct. The only thing that I would add is that I am making notes of the discussion that's happening around the table. We currently do circulate 120-meter radius as other planning applications we do. We can definitely increase that in the new protocol that we're bringing forward to council in January. The applicants are required to do both a sign and a paper notice that was done as per the protocol that exists today for this application, and that has to be done 30 days before the meeting. So through this application, we did meet council's protocol that's in effect today. If you're wanting something more, may I suggest that you defer this application until you have a new protocol, and then ask them to abide to that, and staff can bring back another report at that time.
Councillor Howes.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, or to you, Mr. Chair. I think that's a really important distinction. If you're a business that's dealing with municipalities, you try to play by the rules. And if this process if they've played by the rules, the protocol that exists, we don't have too many legs to stand on, really, in terms to turn around and say, yeah, we just don't like this one. I think the best we could hope for is to defer this decision until a new protocol can be determined.
Councillor Ferrier.
To you, Mr. Mayor, we made the decision 8 minutes ago. We can't unmake that decision. We can decide to hold off on writing a letter until such time that there is a report available for us to recommend that the organization read, which was what I initially suggested 7 minutes ago. But we can't unmake our decision at this time unless I'm incorrect about that.
Councillor Chambers, did you have something? No. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the clerk. Isn't there something in the procedural bylaw about having a revote on a motion?
Madam Clerk.
Find the exact wording.
I'm just not sure what the actual rule says, but it's been suggested, and we just heard from the general manager that they followed all the protocol, and
Councillor Ferrier.
Just, unless I'm incorrect, but through you, Mr. Mayor, to you, sorry, what we voted on, though, is are we satisfied? Not did they follow the protocol, but are we satisfied with the consultative process? And whether that's, I would argue, whether that's their call or not. It's our call if we were satisfied with the process. We weren't satisfied with the process. We voted that we weren't satisfied with the process. So therefore, that's what we voted on. We didn't vote on whether or not they followed the protocol. We voted on if we like the protocol to some degree. So I think we could stand by our decision and just defer the letter until such time that we have more meat to give them with the report that's forthcoming.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's actually three parts to this. Part A is the fact that the Shared Network Canada has satisfactorily completed its consultation with the County of Brant. I believe that part we are satisfied with. Part B is that the County of Brant is satisfied that the Shared Network Canada public consultation process is satisfied with it, and it does not require further consultation with the public. I think that's the one where we have an issue here. And then there's C, which is the actual, we're okay with them building it. So again, out of that recommendation, my understanding from what I'm hearing tonight is it's only the B, the public consultation part, that we are unhappy with. So again, as Councillor Weed stated earlier, we need to be careful here, because if they're given some rules and they have followed the rules, other than the fact that we're not happy with how many public that they have consulted with, we're on a slippery slope here. So I think we need to be very careful what we do with this. And I would just recommend, again, until we get that report back, I understand it's going to be a few months, but we just, we table it until that time.
Councillor Coleman, what do you say to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can live with the tabling for a couple months until we get a new report back and see where we're going to go on this, whatnot. But I disagree with what Councillor Pierce is saying, is that on A, it is completed consultation with the County of Brant. I believe we at this table are the County of Brant, and this was defeated by the majority here on a 6-5 vote. So majority of the county, which I think that's what we are, did not happy with the consultation.
Can I ask the clerk what she found?
If council is interested, they may do a reconsideration at this meeting. It would need to be moved by a member of the prevailing side, so somebody who had voted to defeat the motion would have to move to reconsider the motion, and it would require 2/3 majority vote to
Councillor Wheat.
reconsider.
As we stand right now, this motion that's brought forward has been defeated. Okay? I want to be very clear on that. It's been defeated. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to start all over again. Get a new motion, and we're going to have a 2/3 majority to reconsider. Just because you're going to reconsider it doesn't mean you're going to approve it.
Councillor House.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, to the clerk, as one of the ones who voted to defeat it, I could bring forward a motion now to reconsider the decision in favor of deferring or tabling.
No,
No?
just to,
Just to reconsider, then we talk about, okay, all right, so,
you need a 2/3 majority that will reconsider, and then you'll talk about it and make a separate motion. But first of all, you've got to get a 2/3 majority to reconsider.
okay, so
Councillor House.
I will make that motion.
Councillor Pierce seconded it. Anything else to be said? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed?
Okay. Motion is defeated.
So, back,
It was 7. I had 7 yes, unless I'm,
7-4. I voted no to reconsider.
do you have the numbers?
I believe it was 7-4, but if I'm wrong on that, then we can do that again.
All those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Oh,
Opposed?
1, 2, 3, 4, 7-4. That's not 2/3.
It's not 2/3. Are we back to where we started? Oh, boy. Yeah, Michael, I need help.
I can try. I'm not going to say that. It's my understanding that there's a protocol that staff use to bring forward a recommendation on how to address these tower proposals. Because council doesn't approve them, they're just required to validate, I think, whether the tower company has gone through an appropriate public consultation process. Council has the final vote. Staff make a recommendation based on the protocol. Council makes the final vote. So if they don't feel it's been appropriate, they can vote against the staff recommendation, or vote depending on what the staff recommendation says. So Ms. Dusling says that now the applicant can either proceed with their application or maybe want to come back and try to address council's concerns. And so that's up to the applicant at this point, I believe. And it's my understanding that application now goes, without the municipal consent, it goes down in the hierarchy of what gets approved. So you know, the applicant may be back, or council could, you know, further direct staff to liaise with the applicant, noting that you'll have a new protocol. There's further options for council to consider on this. Or you can just do nothing because you've already turned down the application. That might help, Your Worship, I'm not sure.
Councillor Coleman.
I would move, seeking a seconder, that we inform what's happened and the applicant, and we engage in them and tell them that we are looking at a new process coming in early in the new year. Seeking a seconder.
Councillor LaFerriere. Any, Councillor Chambers wants to speak to it.
If I could ask a question to our solicitor through you, with regard to that resolution. Through you, it's my understanding that an application, when it's made, legally has to be adjudicated under the rules of the day. In other words, you cannot change the rules after the application has been made and then act accordingly. And there's a term for that, and I don't know what the legal term is, but perhaps the solicitor can enlighten us.
Through you, Your Worship, I know that tonight we have an in-camera session with respect to some other matters. I'd be happy to deal with that question in that session.
Thank you. So we have a seconder. Anything else to be said? Councillor?
I will move that the recommendation be tabled until such time as an in-camera report from the solicitor with regard to the advisability of that recommendation be made.
Councillor Gatward? I'll second it. Councillor Pierce, you were going to second it? All those in favor? Tabling it? Yep, we're good. Wow. Public Works Committee report. Councillor Gatward.
It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, that the Public Works. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, that the Public Works Committee report of November 12th be approved.
Councillor Chambers.
Could I request that recommendation number four be removed from the report?
For discussion? Or
I'd like to
remove?
remove it permanently, but for discussion, to be voted on separately.
All right, so we're going to vote to approve everything but number 4. All those in favor? And Councillor Chambers wants to speak to number 4.
Yes, through you, I just have a couple, 2 or 3 quick questions for the chairman with regard to number 4, so I understand it before I speak to it. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to the chairman, it's my understanding that the County of Brant requested Oxford County to commission a report to deem whether the always stop would be warranted or not. Is that
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would request that the general manager answer the questions for this particular item.
Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers. Actually, that's not the way it worked. Actually, we've actually jointly been looking at this intersection. And in fact, Brant and Oxford have a long standing history of looking at this intersection. But most recently, we were looking at it in particular ways, and Oxford actually commissioned that report on their own.
Councillor Chambers?
Speaking to that report, and I don't know whether you have it, Madam Chairman, in front of you, but the first line of that report, which is a 1.5-page report, says the following: at the request of Brant County, Oxford County has commissioned this review. So is that a correct statement or an incorrect statement?
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers, that's in the consultant's report. We were not opposed to them commissioning that report, but I don't think it was at our request that they commissioned it.
So just to be clear then, Brant County did not request Oxford County to commission the report.
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers, I was not the prime contact with Oxford County on this, although I was in on the discussions. I'm not entirely sure who requested who to commission that report.
Okay, we'll leave that in the air. Nevertheless, a report was commissioned, and the report is a 1.5-page report that was presented to the road committee. And in the report, and this is a question to the chairman, in the report, the consultant identified 3 warrants that must be met to merit implementation of a 3-way stop. And in the report, he's underlined must. All 3 conditions must, underlined, be met to merit implementation. So my question is, how many of these conditions were met?
Councillor Gatward? He's directing it to the chair,
Yeah, I'm
looking to
referring to the
staff.
general manager, as I said at the beginning, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Councillor Chambers, can I just borrow your report just for 1 second?
Just before, well, I'll give this to you, but there's another, along with the 3 warrants, there was a 4th warrant identified that could be met as well. And so my next question was going to be, did the 4th warrant or the 4th condition be met? And, okay, I'll cheat a little bit. I'll go a little bit further. It says that neither the 3 combined numerical volume warrants or the collision warrant were met, even though they must be met to warrant a 3-way stop or an all-way stop at that intersection. So am I correct in assuming that at that intersection, none of the warrants were met that would indicate the need for a 3 or all-way stop?
So, through the mayor to council, one thing you got to remember is in the Ontario Traffic Manual, there are the warrants for all-way stops are there. There's the volume, there's the collisions are the main things. And most of our intersections, as you have seen over the years,
Actually,
never meet the warrants.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I have another question. I think the question basically was answered that none of the warrants were met.
That's right.
But I have another question. But I need a report back so I can ask it. Can I have a report back?
Councillor Chambers, you have another question.
The report concludes with a recommendation that says implementation of all the above devices, which are the 3 all-way stops, speed reduction, and enhanced aggressive signage. So implementation of all the above devices should significantly improve traffic safety. That's, in my mind, stating the obvious, but he's stating it as a recommendation. So my question is, would not the implementation of all the above devices improve the traffic safety of any intersection in the county?
In this particular case, there's a few outliers here that change the issues here compared to some other.
My question was, would that, the implementation of all of the devices mentioned in the report, wouldn't that enhance the safety of all the intersections in the county? I can't think of one that it wouldn't. Maybe you can.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. We're not talking about all intersections. We're talking about this intersection at the corner of Highway 53 and Muir Road.
Well, let me.
Can I answer that question?
Well, there's a point of order on the floor, but I'm simply asking questions to the report, so I believe that I should be able to have my questions answered.
You should have your questions answered.
So going back,
I believe the person being asked the question should be allowed to answer the question, or at least attempt to answer the question.
Who were you thinking wasn't going to answer the question?
The speaker, the staff member keeps getting cut off, but, and no, somebody's not going through the mayor to do that, which I was chastised for earlier.
I knew you wouldn't get over that easily. Rob, could you speak to Councillor Chambers, please?
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers. Your statement that these measures at all intersections would improve safety, not necessarily. There are other unintended consequences of always stops, such as rear-end collisions as one example where, or people actually not obeying them because there's no need for them and then causing other issues that do not necessarily make them all safer by implementing always stops.
so isn't that why you should follow the warrants? Because of unintended consequences that may happen if you put always stops that don't meet any of the warrants? Wouldn't that be an unintended consequence that you should be aware of?
Yeah. So, through the mayor to Councillor Chambers. So there are, as I started to say before, there are a couple of issues at this intersection which are different, which are highlighted in the report. One is off of Muir Road, there are a very high percentage of traffic turns there by the one major industry, which is to the south there, which we're all familiar with. You know, very slow and long-term movements. When we know from the speed spy data that our average speed here, our 85th percentile speed here is, I believe in the report, 100 kilometers an hour, plus or minus. The problem that we have here is that when the bad incident happens here, it's going to be a really bad, potential of being a really bad incident is there. And in my past, I've dealt with a couple of other intersections which were very similar to this in their nature of the, you know, the traffic volumes of the, you know, the county roads and the truck traffic and whatever. And in similar scenarios, we went to this. The results were very positive.
Councillor Chambers, you're okay? Thank you. Anything else to? Oh,
But I would like to speak to the motion now that my questions have been answered.
all right.
And obviously, I think you can see, Mr. Mayor, that I'm not happy with this recommendation because I believe that there will be unintended consequences. The always stops on 53 Highway, which I'm not a traffic engineer and I don't pretend to be, but I have traveled through that intersection perhaps tens of thousands of times. And the contemplated stop sign going to the traveling easterly is blind because there's a bend in the road. There was a serious accident a few years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and there's been a couple accidents at that intersection as a result of a car not stopping at the stop sign going on the Muir Road. And we, it was on the road committee then, we requested that rumble strips and enhanced signage and anything else that could be done to make sure that the cars stop at that intersection. So cars traveling through stop signs can be dangerous. This is a former provincial highway, and it is a wide, flat, straight road that cars by nature are traveling beyond the speed limit. The hamlet of Muir is right there. There's 5 or 6 houses. It's not a big hamlet. It's just there's actually clusters of houses along 53 Highway that aren't a town. What I would sooner do, at least at this point, is to aggressively sign the intersection, and that means perhaps the existing stop lights be flashing and rumble strips that have disappeared over the years and not been replaced be replaced, and any additional warnings for the cars traveling on the Muir Road to stop, and the speed limit be lowered at the bend to 60 kilometers an hour to enable the cars to recognize that there's perhaps an intersection coming forward. And there could be, and we've seen it elsewhere, there could be signage of trucks turning with a flashing light. There's all kinds of things you can do to warn the public without bringing the through traffic on a former provincial highway to a complete stop at an intersection that meets none of the warrants for an always stop. I can guarantee you that if you take a drive out there and sit at that intersection and look both ways, and then go down to the Middletown line and 53 Highway, and compare the sight distances and the sights at that corner, where there have been serious accidents as well, including a fatality years ago. Take a drive out there tomorrow and you'll see that the Phragmites completely blind that intersection. So if you're going to put it one intersection, if it's a good idea in one intersection, there are good ideas good for other intersections as well. But it's not warranted. It meets none of the warrants. The consultant underlines must meet. It doesn't meet any of them. And I think you're going to cause confusion. And confusion is not what you want to be causing at an intersection that currently is 80 kilometers an hour that could be 60 with enhanced signage. You'll make the intersection just as safe, as perhaps safer, and you won't have the unintended consequences that the manager identified with rear-end collisions and trucks trying to turn past each other at always stops, which is very difficult to do, and you're going to have confusion there, and I think it's not warranted. And I will request that my opposition to the always stop be noted. If you want a recorded vote, I'll call for a recorded vote with recommendation number 4.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've expanded an industry, or we've allowed an industry out on Muir Road to expand. They have a lot of large trucks that turn off of Muir Road onto the at this intersection. I know the intersection. I've been out there a few times. I think the concern is that when a large truck turns out onto the highway, and as the general manager said, the speed spy indicates traffic is traveling anywhere from 80 to 100 kilometers an hour, that perhaps not this time of year when the roads are in better stoppable condition, but if it's snowing out or slippery because of weather, there's a safety concern that both communities have brought forward. And Councillor Chambers mentioned other ways of making that intersection safer. I don't think the issue is the traffic on Mirror Road. I think the issue is the speed of the traffic at the intersection and on a curve. So I agree with the staff that this would be a way of allowing all those heavy cement trucks and other trucks coming to and from the industry down the road that has expanded significantly to safely turn out onto the road and get going without having to worry about who's going to come up and slam into the back of them. So I support the recommendation, and I'm not sure what the other ward councillor for that area feels, but it was supported at the Public Works Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Miller?
Well, when I first read the report, I did not like the idea of all the traffic on 53 coming to a stop in Mirror. I'm still not happy with it. I do think there's ways around this. Right now, we're not seeing cars back-ending tractor trailers at the moment. And we just passed a resolution earlier tonight regarding the climate emergency. That the County of Brant adopt a carbon reduction strategy target. And I do know that trucks coming down 53 or cars, every time they stop and they got to start again, they are using a tremendous amount of fuel. So if we could deal with this without forcing every single vehicle that traverses that big section from coming to complete stop, I think we should try other means.
Anything else? No one has any comments? Councillor Chambers.
And I don't mean to re-engage here, because I know I'm only supposed to speak once, but with regard to the truck traffic at Steuby Concrete, the count of truck traffic is as a percentage of the whole. And there are far less trucks coming out of Steuby Concrete than there are on Bishopsgate Road, where you have Keith Hall Transport, Jeff Bryan Double D Transport, 2 gravel pits, and Haley's Elevator. If you want to see a dangerous intersection, go at the end of Fairfield Road, and you'll see that trucks cannot see. If Haley's trucks are coming onto Bishopsgate, they can't even see trucks coming. And there are ways to make intersections safer without all-way stops. And we haven't done that here, and I think we should. And I'd be the first one to say, if they don't work, then stop everybody. But this is going to create problems with the alignment of the road. If you have 2 transport trucks stopped on 53 Highway, and someone who is used to coming around that bend, traveling eastward, they're not going to be able to stop, and you're going to create unintended consequences that could be a disaster.
Councillor LaFerriere.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you, or to you. Would it make sense to maybe do what we did with Councillor Bell's motion last month and table it until such time that we could get other options presented to the council as a whole on this? Because it's really complex. There's a lot there. Many of us don't sit on Public Works, so we're catching up through the discussion, and maybe a similar option with a report of options might be in order.
I think it's a great idea. Seeking a motion. Yeah, seconded by Councillor Chambers. Any other discussion?
There's no discussion on a tabling
Perfect.
motion.
All those in favor? It's tabled. Thank you. Corporate Development, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Chambers, that the Corporate Development Corporate Development Committee report of November 18, 2019 be approved, noting that there are 15 recommendations. And I should point out, there was discussion about ideas for meetings with ministers at Roma. And I was going to ask you, Mr. Mayor, because I didn't bring it up at the start, but I wasn't sure where we were going to do that, whether we do that under other business tonight or we do it now. I don't know.
I think we should do it, we have to do it tonight.
Maybe under other business then?
Yeah, we'll do it under
Because
other
I have
business.
something I want to bring forward.
Okay.
But
Are
we
there
did
any,
talk about, we did talk about it at the CDC
Yeah.
meeting, so.
are there any questions to Councillor Councillor Wheat?
But thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to, the presenter, did you say it was seconded by Councillor Chambers?
Yes,
Sorry, he wasn't at that meeting,
he wasn't at the meeting, but you are allowed to second.
not in my opinion, so we have a difference of opinion.
I would, well, it's up to you if you want to go to the clerk, but I'm pretty sure you can do that.
No, I'm just saying that's my opinion, that if someone can't make a motion or second something if they weren't there.
Okay.
Any other questions to Councillor Miller? Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to talk on number 3, if that's okay.
Yep, okay. So we're going to vote on everything but number 3. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And Mr. Bell is going to talk to number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I saw this, I sort of double looked, because I remember talking to Councillor Pearson saying it's quite exciting that we might be doing OSOM, and I said it's short notice to deal with this, and he said, oh, don't worry, it's 2 years from now. And I thought, okay, 2 years is enough, but now I look at it again, it's only 4 months, 5 months, and I just wonder, are we really capable of being ready in 4 or 5 months to do this?
Councillor Miller?
Yeah, I'd gladly answer that question. Normally, I think Councillor Bell's correct. It's pretty tough, but we do have a very, very good economic development team in the form of Russell Press, Donna Clements, and Russell's been working on this for the past, well, almost 3 months now. He's taken some steps. It needs obviously approval from us, needs approval from OSOM, but he's soft blocked off some hotel rooms. He's got activities already planned, so he's on top of it.
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, a couple of things here. Yeah, I think it would be fantastic if we could host something like that. And if we even look at, to this point, until we brought this up, nobody knew where the 2020 OSOM conference was going to be. And if you look back a few years, it is usually, like it's not within a couple of months, but it's usually fairly late where we understand where the conference is going to be. So I think we've got enough time to do this, and I support it.
Councillor Ferrier?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Councillor Miller and I attended this year, and it was wonderful. It is so specific to the type of community we are, but it did not, as somebody who's done a few conferences, it didn't seem intensive in that way. It wasn't, 9,000 people. It wasn't AMO. It's a very, Councillor Bell wasn't there, so I just want to inform, it's a relatively small conference, but a very educational one, and one that, and my understanding is if we get it, we actually get some passes, so it would actually lower our conference cost this annum and bring a lot to the community. I think it'd be wonderful, and I think it's very, very doable in the time frame, having gone to one in the time frame allotted.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers?
Yeah, I was just going to make the comment that the county did host not a OSOM, but an ACRO conference a few years ago, and it was very successful. They had it at the the Best Western by the Home Depot, and it was quite successful. And I'll also mention that I have been to several OSOM conferences as well, and one of the most interesting ones was in Picton, which they held the conference in the community arena, and they had the arena set up as a conference center. It was very well done, and so you don't need a big conference center to have a successful conference, and I think it is a good idea.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting it's not a good idea. I'm just concerned that it's a lot of work to do in a short time. But if there are people that have the experience that say this can be done, I'm absolutely with it and be delighted if we are successful.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Miller.
I'm not answering the questions this time, but I just want to comment that if we do get it, when I asked if we could get it, I was thinking of former Councillor Murray Powell, who attended this conference faithfully for years. And if we could bring it to Paris, I hope we have his blessing.
Any other comments? Seeing none, let's call the vote on number 3. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Staff reports. I don't see any. Information reports? Nothing. Communications? The AIDS Network want a proclamation for November the 25th as AIDS Awareness Week to January 1st for AIDS Awareness Day. Councillor Ferrier?
I'd make a motion to that.
Yeah, looking for a seconder. Councillor McAlpine? Any discussion?
Just that I understand that you and I will both be at this event, one of the events, the panel tomorrow, so just a notification, anybody who wants to come, you'll be there at the early portion, I believe, and I'll be on the panel in my social work role, not as a council member, but it should be a great, great event.
Yeah. Anything else? All those in favor? Thank you. Concerns regarding water fees. Who do I turn to for that? Councillor House?
Mr. Chair, may I speak to this for a moment?
Yep.
Mr. Corney called me yesterday because he had dropped off this letter to the office out front 2 weeks ago, and he hadn't heard anything back. It sounds like the letter went AWOL within our own system, which can happen. So that's why it was a last-minute addition to this council package. He wanted council to see it. I had a dialogue back and forth with him over the last 24 hours. I shared with him my water bill and pointed out that his is actually lower than mine, and that didn't seem to make him feel any better. I wanted to convey, his point isn't that there's an error in his water bill. His point is that all water bills in the county of Brant are too high. So I just wanted to make that distinction. He's saying we all pay too much for our water. It's cheaper in Brantford. I mentioned that our water tastes better, and that didn't seem to help either. But
Councillor Miller?
I read his letter, and I understand the frustration, but the thing is, anybody that pays for water, I mean, it just pays for the system, right? And I think everybody understands, well, I think everybody around this table understands that we're not making money off of this, it just pays for the system. And Brantford has one system, we have 5, but I would certainly make a motion that maybe our water staff could respond to this letter and let them know. I'll throw that on the table.
Okay, Councillor LaFerrier first.
I'd like to maybe add to that. I'd second it, but add to it that and staff receive a copy letter, because we get this question a lot about minimum, the minimum charge. And I know Councillor Bell brought this up at a recent meeting because he hears a lot about it as well, as do I, as do I'm sure everybody. So to have some of that factual letter sent not just to Mr. Corney, but to us to be able to have on file, I think would be very helpful in the future.
Okay, you're okay with that, Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you to Councillor Ferrier for reminding folks that we talked about this a little while ago. And I think I understand correctly that the staff are going to review the rate structure during the course of the next year, and they will consider the balance between variable or consumption-related costs and fixed costs. And I think that's an answer we should be prepared to give back to this particular resident.
Councillor House?
Thank you, and I appreciate Councillor Miller's suggestion and the extra that Mark added to it. I think that would be a great step here. I did try explained to Mr. Kearney in an email today about how we've all had training about safe water and that there is a cost associated with that. But if our water department were able to deliver some details on the technical side of it, that would be better than just my anecdotal response.
Nothing's better than your anecdotal.
That's good. All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Gatward first.
Just one last comment. Not only the system, but replacement of the system. We have a lot of old water pipe infrastructure in older towns in our community, in the county. I'm not sure when all the water systems were put in, but they have to be replaced at times, and that is all included in that cost. It's a user pay system, and everything has to be included, and our water staff do a great job, and I'm sure they'll do a great job on the letter.
Great, thank you. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. 12, are there any questions before we go to resolutions? No? Other business, Councillor Miller?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I was hoping to request a delegation with the Minister of the Environment, Jeff York, regarding modular water and wastewater treatment systems. We have 2, at least, that I'm aware of going in different places. And the problem is, when one of these systems goes in, the Ministry of the Environment treats it like it's the first one to go in anywhere in the world. So there's so many regulatory hurdles that have to be jumped through, and of course, this all costs extra, it's always extra. These systems that Nuterra uses anyways have been tested and tried in the field, in real life, many locations. So what I'm looking for is maybe a meeting with Minister York to see if his ministry is aware of this fact, and if they could possibly look at maybe reducing some of these extra tests and all that they're requiring, that have been done, like I say, in many, many places. Seeking a seconder.
Second, Councillor Bell. Any other discussion? So we'll make the motion to have the meeting with the minister. All those in favor? Thank you. Are there any other ministers that you think that we should be visiting? I'm going to be seeing probably a few with SCORE and with the wardens, Ontario wardens. I'm not sure. The SCORE meets tomorrow, Thursday. So I'm not sure what's up. Last year I got to meet with 12 of them, which was amazing. Made for a short conference. You're always doing something, so they're very useful. So if there's any other ministers you think we should be, Councillor Gatward?
It was mentioned at another meeting about possibly the Minister of Transportation, since it's changed from, I believe, the last presentation was made.
Regarding,
the Bishop's Gate exchange.
Well, I guess it doesn't hurt for us to keep asking. Yeah, I have no trouble asking again.
It's hard to say whether MTO staff have actually updated the new minister on our file.
Okay, that's fair. Seconder for Councillor Gatward for meeting with the Minister of Transportation. Councillor Bell, any conversation to it? Did you want to speak to it? All those in favor? That's great. Thank you, John.
I have another one, potentially.
Yeah, Councillor Ferrier.
To you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe if you're meeting with the Minister of the Solicitor General, they are in your role of Police Services Board and a long time, Police Services Board member. I bet the other SCORE members have the same issue, and we talked about it with our local PP, and they've been open about it, but it's not a decision that can be made at their level. But looking at some of the recruitment levels and the number of FTEs, full-time equivalent officers that are off, and how we replace that when we pay for that as part of our fee for service. That's not something that can be answered at the local level or changed at the local level, because it requires recruitment issues. It looks at issues around PTSD and the rest. So maybe taking that up a level to put it on their radar might be something worth pursuing.
All right, seeking a seconder. Yeah, Councillor Pierce. Any other questions? Yeah, all those in favor? Got that. Thank you. Anything else before we go in camera? No other new business? Councillor McAlpine?
That we go in camera.
Thank you. All those in favor? Okay, we're in camera. Just take a,
And, I apologize, Councillor Wheat, but seconded by Councillor Chambers, that the following recommendation for the CDC Committee in Camera Confidential Report be approved, and that is just item number 1, that the chief building official be directed to employ RSM building consultants to conduct building inspections at 2 Balmoral Street.
any comments or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. Bylaws, Councillor House? Oh, that's right, you're finished. Councillor Miller? Yeah, Councillor House.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman. 22 bylaws, numbers 144 through 166, except for bylaw 164, which was Muir Road, which we pulled. First reading, all those inclusive.
All those in favor?
Second reading, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman. The same group of bylaws, 22, you get the idea.
Any questions? Councillor House? Seeing none, third reading?
Okay, third reading.
Oh, I have to call a vote, sorry. All those in favor?
Third and final reading of the bylaws, 144 to 166, except for 164, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next meeting is Tuesday, December the 17th at 6 o'clock here. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Pierce. We stand adjourned.